Are ready. We now come to the general debate on International Women's Day, and I call the Minister to move. Minister Seema Kennedy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House has considered the matter of International Women's Day 2026. It is an honour to open this International Women's Day debate, held for the first time since 2020 in government time. International Women's Day was forged in the labour strikes of the early 20th century as women came together to call for better pay, shorter working hours and voting rights. It has become an important milestone which celebrates the achievement of women, promotes gender equality and acts as a call to action. In this debate, I've no doubt we will hear about pioneering pathfinders, including women who smashed the glass ceiling in Parliament too and paved the way for us today. Constance Markovich, the first woman elected. Nancy Astor, the first to take her seat. Margaret Bonfield, the first woman cabinet minister, and I recommend the new biography by Nan Sloan, a driving force also behind the Labour Women's Network. Honourable members will mention, I'm sure, the first woman Prime Minister in 1979. Labour has seen the first female Chief Whip, the first female Chancellor, the first black woman MP, the inspirational Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. We've also seen Barbara Castle, Ellen Wilkinson, Jenny Lee and, of course, Baroness Harman in the other place. And not to forget yourself, Madam Deputy Speaker, the first non-white Deputy Speaker and the first female Muslim Minister. I also have many greats and firsts sitting behind me and probably in front of me, Madam Deputy Speaker, including the Honourable Member for Brent East, the first female black minister and the first black woman to speak from this dispatch box. And I'm also proud that many are also Fabian women, and proud that this year we mark 21 years of the Fabian Women's Network. I will give way.
Talking of strong women, Madam Deputy Speaker, my mum, my wife, my 3 daughters-in-law and my 3 grandchildren, 3 wee girls at a very young age, but I'll tell you what, they have the potential to be leaders as well. And they're fierce women, they're strong, and I'm very, very pleased to see that. But does the Minister please, ever mindful on the day we're celebrating Women's Day across Northern Ireland, and the Minister will know this, another lady was killed last week. And that shows the highest number of women have been murdered in Northern Ireland, the whole of the United Kingdom. Does she share my concern where we celebrate women, we also have to protect women, and our society must do that? Thank you so much.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his comments, and indeed I wish all the women in his family a very happy International Women's Day, and every girl is a leader. Let that message ring out from this House. And he is absolutely right that we also must look at where women come under threats through whether that's online or through violence, and we must make sure we do everything to protect women and girls across the UK and across the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, we speak today about the agenda of women's progress. But we must remind ourselves that whilst we have made progress, men and women are still not equal at home and not equal abroad. And indeed, that we face a new challenge, a misogynistic insurgency that is determined to roll back women's rights. And when we look at the level of online abuse, sexual harassment and intimidation, it is horrifying to see us in a situation with products that appear designed to make money out of the sexual harassment of women. So today I want to make 3 main arguments: that women are still not equal, that we must be uncompromising in resisting the backlash on women's rights, and that in these fragmented times, women must work with women around the world. Madam Deputy Speaker, in a world where inequality persists in society, in the economy and in power, I am proud that Labour, led by a cabinet that is 46% women, is putting progress of women at the heart of its missions. That isn't a coincidence. Women's representation in politics drives new conversation and puts wider issues on the agenda. Of the 695 women ever elected to the House of Commons, 405, or 58%, were first elected as Labour MPs, and 182, or 26%, as Conservative MPs.
Thank the honourable member for giving way. I'm proud to have joined this Parliament in 2024 as part of a record number of women elected for Plaid Cymru and of the record 40% of women being elected in that same year. We're clearly on our way for gender equal Parliament. So with this historic milestone within sight, would the Minister commit to Government to centenary actions call to enact Section 106 of the Equality Act, which would require political parties to publish diversity data on candidates to increase transparency?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question, and indeed that I think comments about our 40% of women in the House of Commons today is an important milestone, but we know we're not yet at 50%. And I'm proud that the Labour Party has got close to that and in fact pretty much reached that level. And it is important that we continue to look to the centenary as she describes and look at a range of measures that we can see to make sure that we push forward the progress of women's representation and the role of political parties in that, but also that we look forward to the progress of women in every part of society and every part of our economy. I do want to also recognise, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the choices we make, because Labour's manifesto committed to action to tackle gender inequality, from strengthening rights for women in work and reducing the gender pay gap to halving violence against women and girls. Our groundbreaking Violence Against Women and Girls strategy begins a decade-long whole-of-government, whole-of-society effort to halve violence against women and girls, and is backed by over £1 billion worth of funding. That is a goal I know that every member of this House will be wanting to get behind. I also want to acknowledge the incredible efforts of my friend and colleague, the Minister for Safeguarding, who I am proud to stand alongside in today's debate. And exactly, more. And we're not just acting at home. We have made tackling violence against women and girls a priority in our foreign policy too. Recently, the Foreign Secretary launched All In, a new international coalition to scale up action to end violence against women and girls. It brings together global leaders, experts and campaigners and focuses on preventing violence before it happens. Labour is working to prioritise women's health, with a refreshed women's health strategy to be published soon. Our plans to make work pay are putting in stronger protections for pregnant women and new mothers at work and tackling maternity inequality. We're reviewing parental leave and making flexible working more easily available. And with 2 consecutive years of minimum wage rises, putting more money in the pockets of working women.
Will the Honourable Lady give way on that point?
I will give way very briefly.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and she's giving a brilliant speech that lots of us will be feeling very emotional about. Would the Honourable Lady agree with me and members across the House that whilst increasing the minimum wage is really important, disproportionately does affect female workers, we need to restructure how we value women's work as well and the workforce that is predominantly made up from women?
I thank my honourable friend for her comments, and indeed that is a debate that continues to be ongoing, and indeed will be relevant issues to that I will touch on in my remarks. Madam Deputy Speaker, last week I was also proud to launch our voluntary action plans alongside the Secretary of State for Women and Equalities. Employers with over 250 employees will be asked to submit action plans as part of the Employment Rights Act, showing how they will reduce their gender pay gaps and support employees going through the menopause. We are working with business leaders, civil society and trade unions because we cannot reach workplace equality without the support and the commitment of all. And removing the 2-child limit will also lift 450,000 children out of relative poverty in the final year of this Parliament. A poverty we know impacts women, who the Women's Budgets Group describe as the shock absorbers of poverty. On business, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor has backed the Invest in Women's Task Force, launching a funding pool of over £600 million to be invested in women-led businesses, including £130 million from the British Business Bank. That is the largest fund of its kind globally, addressing the enormous access to finance barriers that exist for women. And alongside, this government is supporting more women in the UK's tech sector. Every year, the economy loses an estimated £2 to £3.5 billion because women leave the tech sector or change sector due to barriers that should not exist. Men outnumber women 4 to 1 in computer science degrees, a subject I also studied, Madam Deputy Speaker. Women are less likely to enter tech, stay in the sector or rise to leadership. I will give way very briefly.
I wonder if she would be able to talk about not just the tech sector, but in my constituency there's a huge number of engineering jobs, and there's such a glass ceiling when it comes to engineering that women rarely manage to make it above. It's a similar issue with race equality when it comes to the higher tiers of engineering.
Madam Deputy Speaker, never a truer word was spoken. What I will say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that building on the Honourable Lady's comment, it is worth the House knowing that at the current pace, it will take 283 years for women to achieve equal representation in tech. That is why I am proud that the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology has launched the Women in Tech Task Force to champion diversity in the UK tech sector, with a pipeline strengthened by stronger engagement with tech in the classroom. There are spaces in which our economy is going to grow, and we need a plan for women to be part of it. Because through history, Madam Deputy Speaker, women have consistently been the backbone of our communities, giving their power, their time, their ideas, and more. And they have done this in our classrooms, our offices, our hospitals, our military, and in the home. History has taught us that despite giving so much, women don't always gain equally to men. Every day, women and girls across the UK challenge the stereotypes so often thrown upon them. But they are our scientists, our teachers, our business leaders, our astronauts, our athletes, and so much more. There is nowhere that women and girls should not be able to reach. But while this government has women's equality firmly on the agenda, the battle is not yet won. Increasingly loud voices attempt to dismiss the necessary protections for an inclusive culture at work. Some argue that our existing equality framework has gone too far, that it hinders progress. Let us be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, these protections embody British values. That women should be treated equally with men, or that you should be treated equally regardless of your race. That is a core British value. It was fought for. The Equality Act last September was described by a now Reform MP as fuelling a corrosive culture of grievance in a Westminster Hall debate, who then called for it to be abolished. But it is not a grievance to recognise that a woman made redundant for being pregnant, or who leaves work because her employer doesn't make reasonable adjustments for the menopause, leaves us poorer as individuals, as an economy, and as society. And this battle, these voices, they are taking up space online too. When we look at the level of online abuse and intimidation, we must tackle this misogynistic insurgency that threatens to roll back women's rights and is having a huge impact on the well-being and aspiration of women and girls across our country too. Online abuse of women athletes is set to be discussed at the next Women's Sports Task Force meeting. And I'm proud that the offence of creating intimate images without consent was signed into force last month, and that our female Secretary of State, announced it will be made a priority offence under the Online Safety Act, delivering the strongest protections for users from such content. But this only happens against a backdrop of changing. Social attitudes, which we are only just beginning to address. New research from Ipsos Murray and the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's Business School shows that 31% of Gen Z men born between 1997 and 2012 agree that a wife should always obey her husband, and 1/3, 33%, say that a husband should have the final word on important decisions, according to a new global study of 23,000 people in 29 countries. We are in a renewed battle of ideas and new conversations about progress and rights, with pressures and influence we also see through online social influences. It demands that we engage, and it is through conversation, legislation, education and campaigning that this government is determined to keep us moving forward. But with the challenge to women's equality now being international, so must our response be. In the year 2000, we led the first UN Security Council resolution on women, peace and security. It was a simple but transformative idea that peace is more durable when women help shape it. UN women statistics show that when women meaningfully participate in peace processes, the resulting agreement is 64% less likely to fail and 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by conflict and are more likely to see their rights curtailed. 60% of preventable maternal deaths and 53% of under 5s deaths take place in settings of conflict and displacement. We continue to use our voice at the United Nations to push for women to be embedded in peace processes, resolutions and humanitarian responses. Indeed, this week, Baroness Smith of Malvern and the UK Special Envoy for Women and Girls, Harriet Harman, are leading our delegation at the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, because this government stands in solidarity with women and girls, not just in the UK, but around the world. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, International Women's Day marks the beginning not only of a month-long celebration of women's history, but also, I hope, a year of progress and action. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Give to Gain, the aim of which is to emphasise power of reciprocity and support, whether through advocacy, education, mentoring or time, to help create a more supportive and interconnected world. Building new networks in our communities to bring hope, leadership and change, renewing our determination, connecting with our sisters at home and abroad, will give us a renewed front line to resist the rollback of our rights and push forward for the progress of women and girls for generations to come. But this month is more than about reflection. It is about maintaining momentum. As Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. That isn't an observation, it's a directive. It is for us, Madam Deputy Speaker, to hold the light up, to highlight progress, and to keep fighting for a better world for women and girls everywhere.
The question is that this House has considered International Women's Day, and I call the Shadow Minister, Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a privilege to be representing today the International Women's Day debate and to follow the Honourable Lady. And it is wonderful to hear the Honourable Lady talk about her passion for fighting for inequality and for the rights and to fight the gender pay gap as well. And I hope very soon to see you in Shadow Cabinet, to see the member in Shadow Cabinet. Yes. Yeah, I mean real cabinet. Yeah, not us. Yeah, that would be terrible for you. You wouldn't like that. And that That topic is what unites us today in this chamber, that we may have differences of opinion on every topic and come at every ideological point of view, but we are united in our ability to exercise that right to debate and to stand up for women. Yep. And I am so grateful to be part of this country and to be able to have those rights that so many women no longer have across the world. And I'd like to pay tribute to Madam Deputy Speaker for not only her amazing work here in the chamber of keeping us all under control, but which is a full-time job for anyone. But it is more, I just wanted to highlight the incredible work that Madam Deputy Speaker has done to champion Uyghur women and girls. Yeah. When everyone was turning their back on Uyghur women and girls, Madam Deputy Speaker, you led the campaign. Yeah. You tirelessly campaigned across the world to make sure that their story was heard and that their voice was heard, and you worked cross-party for that. So thank you from everyone across this House for your incredible work.
Please. I'm incredibly grateful, which is why I was then sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. But there's a lot of very powerful women in this room that won't be deterred by any sanctions regardless. So please continue. Joe Morrissey.
I feel that if one has received sanctions, it is a badge of honour. Firstly, to honour the international scope of this debate, I would like to take this moment to think about the women of Afghanistan who have suffered under the Taliban. The life of all human beings is intrinsically valuable and should always be remembered. And Afghan women whose rights have been systematically dismantled, 100 decrees to restrict their freedom of movement, education, work, expression, visiting a doctor, financial freedom, and there is no protection against violence, beatings, and forced child marriage. May we remember them today, and how quickly the rights we take for granted can disappear. Both across this House and throughout our great country, women have shaped our community, strengthened our institutions throughout the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, and led with courage, determination, and resilience. Women are leaders in business, in education, in science, in armed forces, in charities and volunteer organizations, and of course, here in Parliament. We must also recognize the women who contributed, who are often not recognized. The carers who support their families every day with no thanks and no recognition. The volunteers who hold our communities together, the mothers, the daughters, the sisters, the friends who provide strength and stability in the time we need it most. I have often spoken in this House about the importance of service to our communities and service to our country. That spirit of sacrifice and service is embodied by countless women across the United Kingdom who quietly make an extraordinary difference in the lives of others. May we recognise their contributions today.
Would my honourable friend give way?
I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I just wondered if she would join me in thanking and celebrating the women, the fantastic women in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton, who do exactly what she has just described in businesses, in our local democracy, in our third sector, and in shaping the futures of our girls in community groups and schools.
Thank you. And I wholeheartedly agree with the comments to praise the unpraised volunteers, the community organizers, those that make our towns and villages what they are today. And it is so important that we highlight their contributions today. And in my constituency of Beaconsfield, Marlow, and the South Bucks villages, I see inspiring and dedicated women every single day. Carers fighting for their disabled children, like Hazel, fighting for the Burnham Day Centre to remain open, healthcare professionals at Wexham Park Hospital, entrepreneurs like Ali and Lizzie McIntosh, who are now global presenters for F1 and leading the way in lifestyle influencing. And I wish I had their social media talents. And volunteers dedicating their time to strengthening our communities. Their contribution should remind us that leadership is not confined to these corridors of power, but exists in every town, village, and neighbourhood across the nation. And may I pay tribute to the Taplow Burnham Hitcham Women's Institute for their tireless service to our community and their wonderful 100-year celebration to their branch and the opening of their building 100 years ago by Lady Asta. We owe a great debt to the woman who went before us, and none more so than Nancy Asta. Nancy Asta was a pioneer for women in Parliament, and with her early pioneering, it brought early exposure to the American accent in this place, and it has taken this place 100 years to recover from that. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, it will probably take another 100 years to recover from this. Yes, yes. But we live in hope. And she was a pioneer in other ways, Madam Deputy Speaker, fighting for children and, more importantly, the vulnerable. She supported initiatives to protect children, including raising the age of consent, fought to tackle children living in appalling conditions, helping countless women and girls. What we saw in Nancy Asta was a female leader prepared to confront the uncomfortable and endure the hostility. Many opposed her campaigns, but she carried on, even Churchill, but she carried on. She carried on, and it is wonderful to follow in her footsteps today. That leadership and determination to fight for the voiceless lives on in many outstanding women today.
Will the Honourable Lady give way?
I will give way.
On the point of raising Nancy Asta, there is a statue of Nancy Asta in Plymouth. And in my constituency of Chichester, we have 11 statues that are available for people to view, and none of them are of women. And does she think that it's so important that when we think about how we represent women through history, they need to be represented not physically, but also in statue form? And would she join my campaign to get a statue of an amazing suffragist erected in Chichester, outside Chichester Cathedral, Margaret Ethel Turner, affectionately known as Madge Turner, who was our own suffragette in Chichester? And this campaign has been launched by the Chichester Women's History Group. Does she agree with me that it's a campaign we should all get behind?
I absolutely do agree, and I support the member in pursuing this wonderful statue for Madge, and I lend you my full support in that campaign. And it is fitting that on International Women's Day, the UN's theme is rights, justice, and action for all women and girls. 3 important words that matter to women and girls: rights, justice, action. It is fitting because there are many areas where those rights and that justice and the call to action have been pursued by inspirational women in the face of hostility, not dissimilar to what Nancy Asta faced in her time. And many members across this House have faced similar challenges. And no matter what party we are from, I must respect, Madam Deputy Speaker, the courage that many who have gone before me have blazed the trail for coming to this chamber, fighting for our rights, fighting for the right to be heard, and on their contributions and sacrifice, we are allowed to debate today. And I'd like to start by mentioning a member in this House that has battled for safe spaces for women and sex-based rights. And that is the foundation for which true protection for women and girls needs to start. And none have fought that battle with more energy, resilience, and determination than the Honourable Member for Canterbury. Fighting tirelessly to protect children and women and girls. She deserves our thanks and our respect for all she has done. In the other place, my noble friend Baroness Jenkin of Kennington and Baroness Davis of Devonport led the way in protecting women and girls, again facing much hostility, but never once deterred from doing what they believe to be right. A champion of women-only spaces and defense of biological sex is, and of course, outside of this house, is J.K. Rowling, a woman who has been nothing short of inspirational, facing down personal threats to her safety, determined to ensure the rights of women are heard. And the leader of the opposition, who firmly took a stance to protect women and girls for years when very few joined her to stand up for those safe spaces. It is for that reason that we must also be clear that we as a society have failed many young girls for far too long. I will.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, but I'd also like to make the point that there are many people with different views across this House, and many of which I agree with, and she makes a very good point in naming some of the individuals, but there are many, many other women that stand up for sex-based rights, and I'd like to say that on the floor of the House, and I thank her for her words.
Thank you for that. And there are many women from all different ideological perspectives who have contributed to this debate, and I want to thank them, of course.
For giving way. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. And in her speech, we should also recognise that some people have also been transphobic. We must be very mindful that there are a lot of people who are trans, who feel very vulnerable at this time, and some have committed suicide. So in this debate, can we also hold them in our thoughts?
Yeah. And may I thank the member for that very nuanced response and contribution, and may I thank her for being the first female of colour at the dispatch box, leading the way, and also a chairman of a select committee, and someone who all members of this House from every party respect and admire, and thank you for everything that you do. And as we try to protect young women and girls, no clearer or more scandalous a failure than the rape gangs scandal that we are now confronting. Here I want to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Rotherham and the Honourable Member for Keighley and Ingley, who have both raised this in Parliament, along with Alex Stafford, who is no longer in this place, and the Honourable Member for Ashfield, a cross-party effort of raising this issue time and time again, while very few other members of this House did so. May I commend them for being brave enough to do so. And yes, may I thank, there are so many that I'm not able to thank today, but I want to recognise them as best that I can. And Baroness Casey said, too many shield away from the issue of ethnicity in the rape gang scandal. These honourable members did not. That is real leadership from cross-party members for protecting women and girls. This International Women's Day, let us unite in clear determination that where Nancy Asta led in confronting injustice for the voiceless, parliamentarians of today will follow, speaking up for the rights of women to women-only spaces, making sure that no matter the community or ethnicity or religion, we will never again let a scandal like the rape gangs go unchallenged. And Madam Deputy Speaker, as someone who has fought for women and girls and abuse, sexual abuse, and child sexual exploitation, I think that this is something that we can, every member of this House can support and look at how we can protect women and girls, no matter who they are, no matter where they are from, moving forward. And I believe that that is something we can all agree on. Yeah. And for International Women's Day to matter, it must be more than symbolic. It must combine celebration with action. It must be a further catalyst for rights, justice, and action for women and girls. It must harden our resolve to ensure safety for all women and girls. It must set in clear focus our collective determination that this will be a country where women and girls from every race, religion, and creed are able to contribute their talents to our country with the certainty that we will keep them safe for rights, justice, and action. Our women and girls deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Tulip, Siddiq.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to all the inspirational speeches we've heard so much. This year, International Women's Day feels particularly poignant to me for two reasons. The first is watching the women in Iran. And the reason why this has particularly affected me is because many of you, including you, Madam Deputy Speaker, will remember the fight for 6 years to bring back my constituent, Nazneen Zaghari-Ratcliffe. During that time, I encountered the brutality of the Iranian regime whenever we tried to negotiate her return to our country, and the way that they treated her like she was nothing, in all honesty, and the worthlessness that was attached to her identity. And now watching women who are fighting just for education, just for the right to dress the way that they want, just for the right to live, bombing primary schools full of little girls is something that's really hard to fathom. And every morning, no matter what happens, we wake up feeling very lucky because we know we can walk to work, get on the tube, and we will be safe. And our thoughts today are with the people who are in Iran, especially the women who are fighting for justice. The second reason that International Women's Day this year particularly feels poignant to me is because of the case that I'm dealing with in Bright Horizons Nursery in my constituency, which some people in the chamber would have heard me speak about. And Vincent Chand operated for 7 years undetected, preying on little girls and babies and toddlers, inflicting pain on them and conducting sexual abuse, something that he had already done in his previous workplace, was undetected, given a job in the place where parents entrusted people to look after their children when they went to work, and came back and found out. And they only found out because he had been reported by a brave whistleblower for acts of cruelty towards children, for bullying, not for sexual abuse. And it's only when police decided to seize his devices, including nursery iPads, so he had filmed himself acting sexual acts of violence against little girls in the nursery itself, used it to airdrop the images to his own devices, and that's how he was found out. It makes you think about how much work we have to do to combat violence against girls and women, and that the fight is not over. And I'm pleased to be here today, surrounded by women who have been fighting that, and I hope people like Vincent Chand do get the absolute justice that they should get, and do end up behind closed doors and behind bars as well. And I just want to pay tribute to all the mothers of the children who are affected in the nursery, who have made sure that this never happens again. They are the ones at the moment who are fighting for mandatory CCTV. They are the ones who are fighting to make sure that there's a 2-person rule per child in every room in nurseries. They're the ones who are now fighting for a flare system so that whistleblowing can be done properly and without fear, and that it's not nurseries marking their own homework. But every time I speak about this case, I also want to say that for all the cases that have happened of sexual abuse in nurseries and early years practitioners, there are 1,000 and million other babysitters, staff members and nursery staff workers who look after our children day in, day out, and make sure they're loved and protected. So let's make sure we don't tar everyone with the same brush, but we do need to take it seriously, and something does need to be done. But today I want to talk about my brave constituents, Shunju Paul, who is in the gallery today. The focus of the UN this International Women's Day, as the opposition spokesperson said, is rights, justice and action. And because across the world, women and girls just have 64% of the rights of men, and that's why I want to concentrate on Shunju's case today. Some of you in the chamber would have heard me mention her before, because after 6 years of fighting a legal battle against her former employer, a management consultancy firm, she won a landmark case against unfair dismissal at the Employment Appeal Tribunal in London. Her case sets legal precedent for endometriosis to be considered a disability under the Equality Act 2010. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope you'll indulge me a bit while I talk about Shunju Paul's case, because I feel like everyone in the chamber, including everyone in the world, should be listening to what she had to go through. In 2018, Shunju was diagnosed with severe endometriosis, where she had large fluid-filled cysts on both of her ovaries. This required an immediate operation. She returned to work a month later in severe pain, she told me. She was bleeding. She could hardly walk because she had been pushing herself too much for promotion to senior manager. She told HR, she told them in explicit detail how much pain that she was in. After 3 months after her phased return to work ended, without any warning, Sonju was sacked. She was told to leave the building immediately. Do not contact all the colleagues that you had been working for 10 years now. Just get out of the building, be quiet, and leave. She had worked there for 10 years, and she told me categorically that her entire life was based around her work and making sure that she looked after people that she was serving at Accenture. She was sacked for not being ready for promotion within a required time frame. This is known as the up or out policy used by many corporates, where employees can be dismissed if their manager believes they cannot be promoted. The termination letter, which, by the way, she received minutes after the meeting that she had, did not state any actual reason for her dismissal. It also didn't inform her about the right to appeal or refer to the policy that was being followed. And I feel, excuse me for saying, as a Camden girl through and through, who went to Camden School for Girls, she decided not to take this lying down. She took it to Internal Tribunal, where the High Court later found out that the panel had completely disregarded what she had written in her impact statement. When she took it to tribunal, it ruled that Sonju had not proved that her illness had an ongoing substantial effect on her daily life, and stated that many women with endometriosis had mild or no symptoms at all. The tribunal rejected her claim for disability discrimination and lacked any understanding of the physical impact of her health condition on her own body. She appealed this decision, and High Court eventually ruled that she was unfairly dismissed from her job without her employer following a fair capability procedure or providing any reasonable adjustments after she was disabled because of her health condition. I am so proud of Sonju for her tireless campaigning since her unfair dismissal in 2019, and employers now must follow this judgment on considering endometriosis as a disability and providing reasonable adjustments. More needs to be done to ensure that this does not happen to other women who are physically left disabled by this condition and other gynecological conditions. And I know my friend, the MP for Erith and Thamesmead, has done some brilliant work in this area for years now, but we need a collective voice. We need everyone in the chamber to stand up and speak about this, because it has been taboo for too long now. And it is shocking, if the Minister is listening, that not a single gynecological condition is introduced in the Disability Guidance of the Equality Act. This basic change could have saved Sonju her job. So much time, money and anxiety that she spent 6 years fighting for this unfair dismissal. It could have made a huge difference for countless other women that we haven't heard about, who are facing the same discrimination in the workplace across the country. 1 in 10 women are suffering from endometriosis. 69% of sufferers say that they face discrimination at work. Cases like this are far too common, and it's left us with 1 in 6 women with endometriosis unemployed because of their condition. Women should not be forced to go to tribunal just to get the rights that they deserve, and that's why I believe women with endometriosis should be given specific workplace adjustments and the right to reasonable adjustments to their condition. And alongside that, endometriosis should be listed under reoccurring and fluctuating impairments in the guidance for the Equality Act, so that employers actually understand their legal duty to provide reasonable adjustments to women who are suffering for this condition. And finally,
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. You may be coming to this, but it is an incredible... Oh, sorry, Madam Deputy.
Don't wish to correct any one of our fantastic female parliamentarians, but you means me. You means me. One more time. Dawn Butler.
Thank you. And you are amazing, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend may be coming to this, but my friend Elaine Banton was the lawyer in this case. And I just wanted to also put that on record to your excellent remarks for your constituent.
Well done, Dawn.
Thank you to my honourable friend, and Elaine Blanchard definitely deserves a mention in the workplace as well. There's a lot more I'd like to say about this case because I think it's so important, but I'm very conscious that I don't want to take up too much time because there's so many women who want to speak today in the debate. But I just want to mention that growing up, and I did grow up in a Muslim Asian household, but even then, I didn't hear anything about endometriosis. I never heard the word menopause growing up. If I was ever on my period, I was told to quickly move away and listen and change and make sure my brother didn't hear anything. There is a point at which we need to change that. My mother was very forward in other ways. Growing up in a Muslim household, on Friday nights, we always had dinner with our Jewish neighbours. She was very clear about the fact that in our house you could celebrate Christmas, Eid, Durga Puja, Hanukkah. You could do whatever you wanted because we were citizens of the world. But if you ever mentioned your period, menopause, or endometriosis, that was simply not allowed. So, for the sake of Shonju's case, but also for all the South Asian mothers who are listening out there, this is the time when we need to break the taboo. We need to talk about conditions that affect women, particularly when it affects young girls as well, so they don't feel ashamed and they don't feel like they have to hide it if they're affected by the conditions in the workplace.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She's making an incredibly powerful point. But if we are going to really change things, we actually need fathers to speak to their daughters. And I recall making a very deliberate point when my daughter started menstruating and standing in the supermarket trying to assess and understand what I was faced with a wall of things, and people coming up to me and saying, do you want some help? And saying, no, I need to work my way through this. And we need men to advocate and understand these things as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that point. And I wholeheartedly agree with my honourable friend, who is a staunch feminist, and which is one of the reasons why he's in this debate speaking today. But I'll finish now by saying that the justice that was served to Shonju is not just a victory for herself. It's for the countless women across the country who fought so hard to get reasonable adjustments in the workplace. And I hope the Minister will consider this case and legislation will follow from the Labour government to ensure that women never have to face discrimination in the workplace again.
Fantastic speeches. To stop me interrupting them, you and your, unless you're referring to the chair, should not be said at all. Now I'll come to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Alex Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This year's theme, as we have heard, is Give to Gain, and that prompted me to think about feminism on a global scale and how interconnected we truly all are. Our globalised world is far from isolated countries bounded by iron borders. We exist in physical space and online. Our geopolitical landscape is shifting constantly, and feminism must move with it. The experiences of women are shaped by overlapping factors of race, class, disability, migration status, sexuality, faith, and geography. Feminism policy cannot be effective if it only reflects the lives of the most privileged. Some of the gravest injustices faced by women globally include physical violence, forced marriage, and economic exclusion, and these fall hardest on those at multiple intersections of disadvantage. Progress for women is never a zero-sum game. When we lift up the most marginalised, we all rise. Which is why Give to Gain is such an important theme and has made me reflect on how we as a country and as a society must give through overseas aid if we are to help build a more progressive, fair and stable world. So today, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to raise one of the most difficult and taboo subjects in the area of violence against women and girls, but it is one we must confront. That of female genital mutilation, commonly known as FGM or cutting. This is a sensitive and distressing topic, but to break taboos, we must start to articulate the problem. Female genital mutilation comprises all procedures that involve partial or total removal of the external female genitalia, or injury to the female genital organs for any non-medical reasons. It is steeped in misguided ideas of a woman's virtue, ideas which are pervasive and which manifest in all cultures in different ways, of which FGM is, I believe, one of the most insidious and violent. In January, I travelled to the Gambia as part of a delegation with the Parliamentary Commonwealth Association. FGM was made illegal in the Gambia in 2015, yet the practice continues. In fact, in order to avoid detection, cutting is now carried out on younger and younger girls, and sometimes even on babies, with devastating, sometimes fatal consequences. The practice has no health benefits and causes lifelong problems, including severe bleeding, incontinence, infections, long-term pain, menstrual problems, complications in childbirth, and an increased risk of newborn deaths. Beyond this clear physical trauma, many women live with depression, flashbacks, and lifelong psychological scars. It is a form of torture. FGM is a serious violation of human rights and bodily autonomy, not a cultural inevitability, and more than 4 million girls are at risk every single year. Yet in the Gambia, I also saw hope. I saw the profound impact of not-for-profit and grassroots organisations working creatively and sensitively within communities to remove economic and cultural barriers to change. Data gathering is difficult in a country with such severe levels of poverty, but initial estimates suggest the prevalence of FGM has fallen from around 76% to around 51% of girls. NGOs and grassroots women's organisations are uniquely effective because they are trusted by families and embedded in communities. These organisations are part funded by British overseas aid, which this government is now reducing. Their funding runs out this year, just as the message is starting to get through. Reduction to aid like this tears holes in the safety net for the world's most vulnerable communities and leaves young girls more exposed. The government's decision to reduce the United Kingdom's official development assistance from 0.5% to 0.3% of gross national income will have real-world consequences. It represents the lowest United Kingdom aid contribution as a share of gross national income since 1999 and diminishes our long-standing reputation as a global leader in humanitarian assistance. On the Women and Equalities Committee, in our report on FGM, we were clear. The government must protect funding for programmes that prevent FGM and set out its plans for future investment in this vital work. Instead, in its response, the government confirmed that its flagship programme to end FGM will finish in October 2026 and that there are no plans at all for what comes next. This is not just disappointing, it is deeply irresponsible. When Britain invests in the freedom and well-being of girls globally, we gain a safer, fairer and more stable world. Which is why, when the Liberal Democrats were in government, we secured a commitment of 0.7% of gross national income for overseas aid. FGM is, of course, illegal here too, but in today's global society, British girls are being taken abroad to undergo cutting in areas with fewer protections. In the last decade, more than 41,000 women and girls had FGM identified at an NHS appointment in this country. And yet, in the 5-year period between 2019 and 2024, there was just one conviction under the Female Genital Mutilation Act. Protection must not stop at the border. Intervention must happen before a child boards a plane and after she lands. Frontline NGOs in source countries are often best placed to prevent FGM before it happens. The practice of FGM is rooted in gender inequality, control of girls' bodies and forced silence. True solidarity means recognising that their struggle is our struggle. By supporting global efforts to end FGM through aid and diplomacy, the UK helps meet its international commitments and reduces the chance of FGM happening to people who live here. This government must not be complicit in removing the progress that is preventing such violence against girls, no matter where they are born. Madam Deputy Speaker, understanding intersectionality is vital to feminism today, and I am calling on the government to recognise that in our interconnected world, solving violent crime against women and girls everywhere is everyone's responsibility.
Abena Oppong-Asare.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a privilege to speak in International Women's Debate. We reflect the women who have created International Women's Day and the women who have marked every day since. Women across the world of politics, trade unionism, business, science and arts, making strides forward in the face of ignorance and misogyny. Women taking a sledgehammer to the glass ceiling, smashing through the barriers and making space for those who have followed. I reflect on the women who have lit the pathway to my own place in Parliament. The Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newham, the Mother of the House, is an inspiration to so many of us. I'm also thinking of Baroness Harman and Baroness Amos in the other place. And of course, you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And of course, on the front bench, my honourable friends, the Equalities Minister and the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. You have such a long title.
She can't come.
Yes. And all the women I've met through my years leading the Labour Women's Network. These are the giants on the shoulders we stand. They lift us up. And in turn, we must lift others in Parliament and in our communities. And globally too, we have heard in this debate about the status of women globally. Across the globe, women are denied rights, basic rights to school, have a job, be paid equally, enjoy equal legal rights and exercise basic freedoms. For example, Afghanistan, 2.2 million girls are banned from secondary school by the Taliban. Only a quarter have jobs. In particular, cruelty of Afghan women are barred from entering the medical professions, but the Taliban ban women being treated by men. So women are denied the basic right of basic medical care. In Iran, women hold only 64% of legal rights enjoyed by men. In Iran, women are required permissions from husbands to get a passport or travel abroad. Girls as young as 13 can be married if a male judge decrees it. There are no criminal offences of rape within marriage or violence in the home. It is women who are leading the resistance to the Ayatollahs in Iran, risking everything from justice and liberation. And we should take inspiration for women standing up for their rights around the world and here at home. So I'm proud that we've passed the Employment Rights Act because it's women who will benefit the most, especially low-paid women, women of colour and working-class women. Workers will have a right to guaranteed hours for the first time, which means clarity on how much you will be earning and the stability to plan childcare and family expenditure. This will be life-changing for millions of families. And none of these steps forwards come from a clear blue sky. They come from decades of struggle and argument, reversals and defeats, and step forwards and progress. They come because of the suffragettes campaigning for political rights and the likes of Barbara Castle campaigning for economic rights. So yes, we've seen the progress in social, political and economic fronts, but equality is still a distant dream. As the Minister said, take pay. According to the Office for National Statistics, median weekly earnings for female employees working full-time was £710 at April 2025, compared with 815 for male full-time employees. Equal pay remains some way off. And then also take healthcare. The harsh truth is that women continue to get a raw deal in the healthcare system. We do not enjoy true equality within the NHS. We have a system shaped and largely run by men, with women's health a secondary concern. There is still a male by default culture within the healthcare. And I've been campaigning for faster treatment for endometriosis and fibroids, where 1 in 10 women suffer from these painful and incurable conditions. Yet on average, the length of time women are waiting for diagnosis has gone up to nearly 10 years. It has gone from an average of 8 years to 9 years and 4 months. And if you're a woman of colour, that is literally a double whammy of racism and sexism, where it's gone up by 11 years. So women are waiting in pain for years. Their concerns are dismissed and their pains are ignored. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. If 1 in 10 men suffered painful, incurable disease, no offence, there will be faster treatment and research into cures, times off work and systematic and sympathetic hearing from society. So as it is, women face ignorance, discrimination and stigma when they present crippling, blinding pain and heavy bleeding. So on International Women's Day and this debate, I want to pay tribute to Georgie Willman for creating her brilliant film, This is Endometriosis. I was delighted to see it win Best Short Film at the BAFTA this year. It is a truly well-deserved recognition. I would also like to commend the work of the Chair of the Women and Equalities Committee and the Chair of the APPG for endometriosis, and of course my honourable friend for Hampstead and Highgate, who has been supporting her constituent who was dismissed for working in her organisation for after 10 years because of her condition with endometriosis. Sandra Paul, you are inspiration to us all here, and thank you for the work you have done with your MP in making sure this hits us nationally. I have argued that the solutions must include enhanced training for GPs to speed up diagnosis and improving the education of young people and women on menstrual cycle. I'm looking forward to the new Women's Health Strategy, and I hope it places women front and centre in the strive for equality for women within the NHS. I already welcome the shifts to use greater use of technology towards local diagnosis hubs and to greater awareness about women's health conditions. But of course, we have far further to march. I take enormous inspiration from women and girls I meet in my constituency who are fearless and driven and dedicated women who want to live out their potentials. So I want to take an opportunity to name a few. Chimamaka Meninki, apologies if I pronounced it wrong. She is a dedicated wife, mother and community champion in Thamesmead who supports others through healthy cooking workshops. Jatinda Rai, who is the CEO of Bexley Voluntary Service Council, who supports charities and communities and local people in my constituency and beyond. Chantel Morris, who I met in one of my constituency surgeries, who shared her experience of homelessness and spoke about her aim to provide support to local people and families facing eviction living in temporary accommodation. So I was delighted to see her organisation hit the ground, and I was delighted to attend her launch of the Morris Mission in Erith last October, where she now provides training to young people to support local people. Jo Dunkley at the Off Ropes, who has done incredible work bringing the brilliant charity to life through her passion of boxing, shared by so many. They support local adults facing mental health challenges to build confidence, resilience and lasting connections through sport. So I was delighted to cut the ribbon at their new gym in Abbey Wood last November, and since then it has gone from strength to strength, and a huge credit to Jo for making this happen. I also like to pay tribute to the staff at the community hospice where I'm patron. In particular, Anita Saunders, who's stepping into the CEO role from the Director of Income Generation, and Dr. Leslie Ball, the Medical Director, who is also helping to steady the team through their leadership transition. And finally, although I've mentioned her in previous speeches on International Women's Day, I wanted to mention once again the brilliant Kate Heaps. Kate has been the Chief Executive of Community Hospice after nearly 2 decades with her team. She has grown the hospice work and fought hard to improve hospice care locally and nationally. And I want to pay tribute to her and wish her the best luck in her next steps. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is International Women's Day debate, and I want to highlight that I'm proud of what this government has achieved so far towards a fairer, more equal society and economy. I am lifted up by my sisters in Parliament and the amazing women that I meet here on a day-to-day basis in politics and around this place. So even in the darkest times and amidst times of uncertainty, we support each other and we uphold our convictions and our passion and uplift each other in representing our constituents and beyond, and fighting on campaigning issues which are important to our constituents.
Thank you.
Wendy Chamberlain. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And on this International Women's Day, I rise to say a few words about the women and girls in Afghanistan, as I am the chair of the APPG for Afghan women and girls. And I reflect some of the comments that the Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead just made in relation to their experiences. I saw comments in the Telegraph at the weekend that stated the fact that International Women's Day is marked in Afghanistan shows that the day is meaningless, and I would beg to differ with that assessment, particularly given the number of us that are here on a Thursday afternoon. But factually, it's not listed as a holiday in Afghanistan, and we're not seeing celebrations or protests, debates or marketing based on the day itself there, simply because that is not possible for women and girls in Afghanistan. Afghanistan remains a member of the UN, which marks the day, but you don't need to formally indict banning something to effectively do so. Not when women cannot gather and they cannot speak, not even in their own homes if they can be heard outside of them. But nonetheless, there is a value to International Women's Day, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I believe even in the darkest of circumstances, there is still value in this day to the women of Afghanistan. As we are hearing in this debate, International Women's Day is about so many struggles, but also about celebrations. And the women of Afghanistan's struggles and the celebration of their resilience has equal value today. And when they cannot speak for themselves, those of us with voices internationally can do so. And indeed, elevating the voices of Afghan women is what the APPG is set up to do. But there is no sugarcoating it, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is bleak in Afghanistan. A new penal code was introduced in January that has effectively legalised domestic violence, including sexual assault within marriages there. Husbands are explicitly authorised to discipline their wives for non-specified transgressions. And the only crime in the books is for a husband who beats his wife with a stick in such a way that it causes severe injury, such as a broken bone. The burden of proof for this offence lies on the woman, and the punishment, if proven, is just 15 days in prison. Injuring animals in Afghanistan carries a greater penalty. And I doubt if we will ever see a prosecution under this law, given that gathering the proof that required would involve the husband who has committed the assault chaperoning his wife to hospital to get the evidential X-ray required. And on the other hand, if a woman tries to leave a marriage by visiting her father or relatives and does so without her husband's consent or refuses to return, you can imagine circumstances where somebody would look to do that in order to escape domestic violence in their house. Then that woman can go to prison for 3 months. And if a woman is found to have abandoned Islam, and I believe here we are talking about the Taliban's interpretation of the faith, which many disagree with, then she can be jailed indefinitely with 10 lashes daily until she chooses to return to the religion. There are severe restrictions on working, which the Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead referred to. Some organisations in some areas have negotiated the right for women to keep their jobs. Women still can provide health care, though increasingly women are being denied the right to be trained in healthcare, which means that you can very easily see what that means for the future of maternal and female care in Afghanistan. But we are certainly a long way away from there being a freedom to work, and financial autonomy is simply not a reality. And the future for the next generation is even bleaker. For girls now growing up without completing their education and without women being able to have medical training, there will be a point where there are no women left to provide that health care. And the reality is that in a country at war, at the forefront of the climate crisis, where 17 million people faced acute hunger this winter, and with millions of displaced people returning from its neighbours, including Iran, it is women who are bearing the brunt of the desolation. And I'm aware that in setting out this reality, I'm not elevating the experiences or feelings or voices of any one woman. There are 25 million women in Afghanistan, and each and every one of them should have the right to speak, to live freely, and indeed to live at all. And prior to 2021, they were able to do so. So on this International Women's Day, I would like to see commitments from the government to the women and girls of Afghanistan. I put on the record that I do not agree with the government's decision to close the door on safe and legal routes to refuge or to study or work. I was told on Monday here in the Chamber by the Minister responding to the statement on the government's response to immigration that it was about ensuring that universities were not making the decisions in relation to who got to stay here. But if there are no other ways for people to come and seek safe refuge, it is not surprising that people take that opportunity. And if they no longer have that opportunity, it will not be surprising if they revert to circumstances such as irregular routes, and by that I mean the small boats that we all say we want to prevent. But having made those decisions, I call on the government to do more in Afghanistan, much more. The Minister at the outset in her remarks talked about the work this government does overseas, but I do beg to differ in that assessment. Afghanistan is not one of the ring-fenced countries that the government has featured as it looks to cut ODA spending. But Afghanistan is apparently a priority. I'd really like to understand what that means and what that looks like. I think it's important that we also recognise the strength of Afghan women. The APPG has had the privilege of hearing from several Afghan women in the last year, as well as NGOs and academics who've spent time on the ground. We've heard a lot, unsurprisingly, about the loss of hope, but we've also heard about resilience, the unbelievable resilience. Afghan women live in unthinkable circumstances for any of us here, but they keep on. And whilst this is a speech setting out terrible things, I'm not asking you to pity the women and girls in Afghanistan. In talking about them, I'm asking you to take action. And I know, Madam Deputy Speaker, you were previously a member of the APPG in the last Parliament and how supportive you were and continue to be. But to end, I want to share the remarks that the APPG heard last year from a female medical practitioner on the ground who told us that she was speaking to us as parliamentarians as a witness to the quiet suffering and untold strength of Afghan women. These stories are not just tragic, they are powerful, and they must inform policy decisions and humanitarian priorities moving forward. I urge the government to heed those words.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's my absolute pleasure to rise to speak in this year's debate to mark International Women's Day. The important day that it is does give us an opportunity not only to reflect on how far women have come, but disappointingly how far we have yet to go, but it also allows us to recognise the women who continue to shape and strengthen our communities every single day. And I want to use my time today to celebrate some of the remarkable women across South Derbyshire who are making a real difference. It's my absolute favourite thing to do to make sure people feel seen in this place. Firstly, Khalila's story. Khalila is my right-hand woman in the constituency. She runs my office and I honestly do not know what I would do without her. I'm sure many of us across this house will probably share the experience with some incredible women in their teams.
Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Lib Orm and correct a mistake I made in business questions this morning when I didn't give recognition to her as being the founder of I Love Swad, which is a Facebook page which has got almost 46,500 members. Incredible achievement. And also Leslie Aspey. Now, I hope Leslie Aspey feels seen by me for the woman she is, both in the constituency as her MP and in this place. She will know why I've mentioned her name. In Melbourne, Sharon Brown is the driving force behind the wonderfully vibrant Melbourne Festival of Arts and Architecture, which last year celebrated its 20th year. She also manages the Creative Melbourne Gallery. Through her work, she has brought art, culture and creativity to the heart of her community, creating opportunities for artists and inspiring residents and visitors alike. Also using creativity as a force for good is Julie Batten. She's the director of People Express. Julie has led the organisation since 1992, and under her leadership, it has used the arts as a powerful tool for engagement, working with a diverse range of people across our community and enabling them to become the writers, filmmakers and artists of their own stories. Her work helps ensure the creativity is truly accessible to everyone. Supporting local enterprise is Keely Briggs, a marketing expert who provides networking opportunities for businesses across South Derbyshire, particularly in Swadlincote. She is a passionate champion of small businesses and organises the annual Small Business Showcase, giving local entrepreneurs a platform to grow and succeed. Entrepreneurship is also embodied by Elaine Pennell, the founder of Lemon and Lime Interiors, whose business has grown into a highly successful company, supporting homeowners and property professionals alike. Supporting that growth with her is Katie Lavis, who started her own business and now works with Lemon and Lime as it continues to expand. Another fantastic local entrepreneur is Tracy Payne, whose work and dedication exemplify the determination and creativity of women running small businesses in our community. Public service is another area where women across South Derbyshire make an enormous contribution. And Angela Archer, Chair of South Derbyshire District Council, is a passionate advocate for children with special educational needs and disabilities. As a parent of SEND children herself, she co-founded the charity Shout to support families navigating the challenges that SEND can bring. There are also people like Keddy Bailey, who quietly supports families of SEND children, demonstrating the compassion and commitment that empowers families at times of significant challenge. In the voluntary sector, I want to recognise the work of Holly Benton, Chief Executive of South Derbyshire CVS, and Petra Parker, who manages their food hub. Together, they support local people to access food parcels, befriending services, help to return home after a hospital stay, and a wide range of support, ensuring that no one in our community feels alone when they need help the most. Ingrid van der Wiede, editor of the local publication Swad Style, keeps residents informed about what is happening across Swadlincote and the surrounding area. She also leads the wonderful Swadlincote Festival of Words, taking place later this month, which celebrates literature, storytelling and creativity for all ages. Our cultural heritage is also being preserved thanks to Becca King, the museum manager at Sharp's Pottery Museum, who works tirelessly to ensure that our local history is accessible, engaging and celebrated. I would also like to recognise Peggy Moore, whose dedication to remembrance in our community is truly extraordinary. Peggy has spent countless hours knitting poppies, creating a life-size knitted Tommy soldier and collecting donations for the Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal. Her dedication ensures that the sacrifices of those who served are never forgotten. I also want to recognise Maria Hansen, MBE, founder of charity Me&D. Since founding the charity in 2006, Maria has dedicated herself to supporting families facing life-changing and life-limiting conditions. Her vision, compassion and determination have helped thousands of families across the UK, and this remarkable work has been recognised with the charity being awarded the King's Award for Voluntary Service. In my constituency, there are also women whose leadership continues to inspire long after they've left public office. One such person is Edwina Curry, the first female MP for South Derbyshire. To this day, residents still speak fondly of her to me as a dedicated constituency MP who worked tirelessly on their behalf. I'd also like to give a special mention to Margaret Garner, an absolute gem in our community, in Repton in particular. Margaret, now in her 80s, is an incredibly loyal and supportive friend, a volunteer for many activities in Repton, and swears like a trooper. She is the kind of person who lifts those around her, brings humour and honesty wherever she goes, and reminds us all of the strength and spirit that runs through so many women in our communities. And of course, none of us would be here today without the women who came before us and fought to open the doors of democracy. One such woman from my constituency is Hannah Mitchell, a suffragette who lived in Newhall in the early 1900s, an activist, a rebel, and one of the many women who challenged inequality and fought for women's rights to take part in public life. Madam Deputy Speaker, the women I've mentioned today come from many different walks of life, from business, the arts, public service, charity work and community leadership. What unites them is their determination to make the places they live better for others. There are, of course, so many incredible women across South Derbyshire. Giving a few shout-outs today inevitably means I have missed someone. But I hope this speech goes some way towards recognising the extraordinary contribution that women make across our communities every single day. Thank you.
Right, we now have a maiden speech. Can I first of all say and remind everyone there is no interruptions during this maiden speech. Anna Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 4 weeks ago today, I was in college, a plumber learning how to plaster, and today I'm in Parliament as an MP. And being here is the honour of my life, but I don't want this to be unusual or exceptional. I truly believe that anyone doing a job like mine should get a seat on these benches. And where I'm from, we're taught to look after each other, to look out for each other, to stick up for each other and to stick together, to see each other as human. And I'm so proud of that humanity, and that people in Gorton and Denton and Burnage and Levenshulme and Longside and Abbey Hay feel that way too. It's in our blood and in our bones. We see each other as human. Where I'm from, we give a nod to the statue of Emmeline Pankhurst. We remember the farm worker and seamstress Hannah Mitchell, the trade unionist Mary Quayle and the mill worker Annie Kenny. And of course, Elsie Plant, who's from just down the road from me and who I named one of my beautiful greyhounds after. I think of these brilliant women a lot, and especially today as we debate International Women's Day. And I think of many others too, from pits, slums and factories. The women who changed the system so that I could be here. The women of colour whose names we will never know because history didn't bother to recognise or remember them. But we do today because without their struggle and their fight and their determination to stick together, none of this could be possible. And it's bittersweet to recognise these brilliant people, but to be reminded that we still need to try and be them. The constituency that elected me is the 15th most deprived constituency in the country. It has suffered decades of neglect and broken promises. And we see this every day right in front of us. The litter, the fly tipping, the state of housing, the struggle for a job that you can build a life on, the filthy, polluted air and the reduced life chances, the sheer unfairness of it all. And my constituency has been hit hard by the ongoing cost of living crisis. And now none of this is fair, none of this is right, and none of it happens by accident. So I very much share my predecessor's strong commitment to tackling health inequalities and putting local people and all of our communities at the heart of decision making. That's how we begin to turn things around, to give people agency and a genuine chance of a better today and a better tomorrow. And to the girls who I saw photos of, who went to school on International Women's Day dressed as Hannah the plumber, in their overalls, spanners and trademark hair. To the 10-year-old boy at Hideout who rock climbed an incredibly high wall with me and who saw me suddenly become very terrified of how far up I was, and who said to me, "Don't ever give up. And if it's scary looking down, then just look at what's in front of you." To the women in my life who've had my back, who've fought for equality alongside me. And to the men that I work with, especially the lads on my plastering course who dealt with my newfound spotlight in the middle of our training very well. But those men who will suffer the effects of this unequal society through their mental health. To the veterans I know who were willing to risk everything and come home and find that society was turning its back on them. To the white working classes who are always lumped into one group and never appreciated. To everyone who will have nowhere to sleep tonight or will barely exist in a cold, damp and insecure home. To my trans siblings who get blamed for everything. To the Muslims everywhere who are constantly and often violently scapegoated. To the disabled people who can't access the world because of structural inequality that is completely fixable. To the people of colour who have to work harder at everything. I don't always get it. I won't say I always understand it. But what I do know is what it feels like to be looked down on, to be let down and left behind, to be less worthy because of something about me. And our struggles may be different, but our humanity is the same. We always stick together. We always fight for each other. And that is what I want us to take forward from International Women's Day, and to do that every single day. The cleaners, the bus drivers, the nursery workers, the foster carers, the home carers, the unpaid carers, the teaching assistants, the bin collectors, the warehouse workers, the delivery drivers, the school dinner staff, the lollipop wardens, the supermarket workers, the posties, the library staff, the kitchen porters, the farm workers, the mechanics, the ground workers, the scaffolders, the electricians, the plasterers and the plumbers. We deserve to be here, every single one of us. And I will make space for you to come and join me, to get to have your say. And from the bustle of Longside Market to the many Irish pubs in Levy, Sue's Chippy and Tony at California Wines in Gorton, the amazing young people at Hideout, the best hash brown butty at Cafe Plus in Denton, and the women-led social enterprise at Dahlia Cafe on Burnage Lane. You are the best of our brilliant communities. I want to put Gorton and Denton on the map by championing the positives about our community, the spirit, the warmth, the grit, and the way that we help each other out every single day. Whether that's our neighbours where we live or our siblings in places like Afghanistan, Gaza, Sudan, Iran, wherever we are, we deserve to live freely as the human beings that we all are. We do things differently in Manchester, and it makes me proud every single day. And now I want to make Abbey Hay, Levenshulme, Burnage, Longsight, Gorton and Denton proud of me. Thank you so much for putting your faith in this plumber and newly qualified plasterer. Together we can make hope normal again, and we will look after each other, whoever we are, because where I'm from, that is just what we do. Thank you.
Can I just say, and at least you can cross the football political divide by being a Bolton Wanderers supporter. Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and let me start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton on her first speech in this place. I welcome her to her place, and I don't know if she's noticed that the Palace of Westminster is in need of some maintenance, and so it's entirely possible that both her plastering and her plumbing skills will come in useful in the very near future. I rise to speak in my first International Women's Debate, and I have followed this particular debate, Mr Speaker, since before I was elected, and so it's a true privilege to take part today. And I have to say, and forgive me, Mr Speaker, but if the composition of this chamber, by which I mean the number of men and women relative to each other, was like this more often, I feel like we might have some different kinds of debates in this chamber. Today we celebrate women in our communities and across our country and our world. We celebrate extraordinary women who achieve incredible things for the good of humanity. And in that context, it is a great but sad honour to sit opposite the coat of arms of my late dear friend Jo Cox, with whom I served on the board of the Labour Women's Network, and think of her every time I come to this place and see her coat of arms. We miss her and her contributions dearly. I've previously mentioned Jenny Lee in my contributions, a proud Fifer who grew up in Cowdenbeath in my constituency and served as a Labour MP for 2 different spells. As well as having been the first ever UK Minister for the Arts and the creator of the Open University, it is less known that Jenny served in the Ministry of Aircraft Production during World War II, keeping aircraft factories running during the Blitz, and she was called to do so because of her no-nonsense attitude and her ability to get things done. That's something that I take inspiration from. I'm proud to follow Jenny as the 595th woman amongst many thousands of men elected to this Parliament, together with an unprecedented number of women MPs. Our Labour government has important plans to advance women's equality, from halving violence against women and girls to transforming women's experiences of maternity care, a subject about which I met Right Honourable the Baroness Amos just this week. But as well as the women who are recognised for extraordinary achievements, we must be clear that the unseen work that women across the world do every day does not receive the recognition it deserves. According to the UN, women and girls do 16 billion hours of unpaid care work every single day. Their work is the very glue of families, communities and economies. Countries could not function without it. Yet this work remains largely invisible, undervalued and unequally distributed. Today I want to sound a warning. We know that violent struggles are being fought for global power. But around the world, and increasingly at home, the struggle for power is being expressed as a struggle for control over women and our bodies. My honourable friend, the member for Aylesbury, and I have written about this together this week. There are many shocking examples of the battle to control women's bodies. In Iran, as my friend, the member for Erith and Thamesmead mentioned, the oppressive regime has been desperate to prevent women from dressing the way that they want to, despite the incredibly brave protestations of amazing women there in the wake of Mahsa Amini's death. In Afghanistan, as the honourable member for North East Fife spoke about so eloquently, the Taliban have tested the limits of whether the world would stop them from enforcing gender apartheid, forcing women out of schools and workplaces and into the home. They looked for and found the answer that they wanted, that indeed the world does not care enough to stop them. In Sudan, the world's worst humanitarian crisis, rape and sexual violence is routinely used as a weapon of war. At the Munich Security Conference, which I attended recently, our Foreign Secretary, my honourable friend, the member for Pontefract, Castleford and Nottingley, spoke powerfully about her visit to Sudanese refugee camps and the horrific accounts she heard there, including the systematic rape of girls as young as 8. I'm proud to be a former chair of the Circle, the global feminist organisation founded by Annie Lennox. Only this morning they shared data with me which shows that sexual violence in conflicts worldwide has increased by 25% in the last year. Madam Deputy Speaker, in conversations about a shifting global order, there is an increasing subtext of the need to control women's bodies. We see this in some of the attacks on the legitimacy and funding of the United Nations. I've worked with the UN in my previous work, and make no mistake, there are many reforms it would benefit from. However, starving its institutions of funding to do work that no one else will do, for people no one else will help, is a grave error. Work like providing contraception to women in war zones and refugee camps so that they have some basic control over their bodies in situations where they have control over almost nothing else. And in the context of domestic cuts to our own aid budget, which is a source of concern to many of us, we must do everything possible to preserve support for women and girls. And I know that the Foreign Secretary is doing important work on this. But we mustn't content ourselves by believing that this misogyny only exists abroad. Matt Goodwin, the Reform candidate in the Gorton and Denton by-election, said that women who don't have children should be taxed more, and that young women need an education in fertility. Shameful. As if The Handmaid's Tale was something that we should aspire to. He seems to believe that women who choose not to have children or cannot are somehow failing in their duties. Reform have said that, were they in government, the Equality Act, the basis for much of the progress we've made on women's rights in the UK, would be repealed. Shame on them.
Yeah.
Online, British women are stripped of the agency we have over our own bodies, exemplified by Grok weaponising women's bodies through nudification apps, which our Labour government is right to crack down on. My honourable friend, the member for Lowestoft, had the truly awful experience of someone using this technology to make a fake video of her being chloroformed and prepared for rape. This makes the opposition frontbench comments in the previous statement all the more unacceptable. The intended humiliation of women online is not simply cruel or misogynistic, although it is certainly both. It is intended to instill fear and to signal that some violent men believe they are entitled to dominate women. It is to try to normalise this abhorrent behaviour. Last week, ahead of International Women's Day, I met with the Fife Violence Against Women Partnership. We discussed the more than 5,000 incidents of domestic abuse and over 1,100 crimes of indecency reported to the police in Fife last year, and we know that there will be many more unreported. They also shared with me their concerns about social media and the misogyny spread online by so-called male influencers. I heard shocking reports about some of the things that local schoolboys have said to female teachers, comments that they have learned online. These included female teachers being told by boys that they teach, and I quote, "You're so ugly, I wouldn't even rape you." Male influencers online also seek to spread the idea that the role of the trad wife is what girls and young women should aspire to in life. This is the idea that women belong only in the home and that we should all take our fulfilment simply from cooking meals for our husbands and rearing children. This online misogyny is spread by the likes of Andrew Tate and the late Charlie Kirk and far too many others, and it is aided by harmful algorithms. Perhaps it should not surprise us that a new global survey has found that younger men increasingly believe that a wife should obey her husband and that men are expected to do too much to support equality. This is not an accident. There is transnational organisation to make it happen. The European Parliamentary Forum for Sexual and Reproductive Rights found that $1.18 billion was pumped into European movements dedicated to rolling back women's rights between 2019 and 2023. This funding came from 275 different actors, including church-run NGOs and far-right populist parties. Russia was the biggest source of donations, and the United States the second biggest. It came especially from American Christian nationalists. This American funding is now accompanied by financial help from the US government, which has set aside $200 million to support MAGA-friendly think tanks in Europe. Let us be clear that this is designed to spread their ideology, including here in the UK. So when we, the decent majority, both in this House and outside of this House, confront the grassroots arms of the far right, local groups acting in our communities, let us be clear that they are not just isolated local groupings of people. They are the grassroots arm of a well-organised international effort to reverse women's rights. Madam Deputy Speaker, our government is doing a huge amount to drive forward women's equality on closing the pay gap, on childcare, on tackling violence against women and girls, and so much more. I am proud of that work. But we face a dark threat to the fabric of our society from this organised misogyny that I have described. We must defeat it, and we have much to do.
Lincoln Jopp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by paying huge tribute to the member for Gorton and Denton for her maiden speech. She spoke with grace, poise and purpose. And I think that her constituents are very lucky to have them, her representing them here, whether they voted for her or not. Members on these benches will know that I am not overly competitive. I just have to win everything. And so I was rather devastated that the new member made a far, far better maiden speech than my own meagre offering after the general election in 2024. She said she wanted to put Gorton and Denton on the map. And she certainly put it on my radar, because I was wondering, when she was listing the number of distinguished people from her constituency, whether she would get round to mentioning Ethel Sunny Lowry, who was the first British woman. She was born in in Gorton, and she was the first British woman to swim the English Channel in 1933. And I know what honourable members are thinking. Surely I have got some neat segue to other women with water-based heroics from my own Spelthorne constituency. And I wouldn't like to disappoint honourable members, because in 1903, at 111 White Hart Lane in Barnes, young Amy Gentry was born to a Cockney father who had worked his way up and become a publisher. And they bought a plot on an island called Hamhor Island. Now, Hamhor Island is the southernmost point of the River Thames, and it is also the southernmost point of my Spelthorne constituency. You could get camping plots there. And she went there from the age of 1, and her dad got a boat, and they used to love messing around in boats. And before she was 10 years old, the people on Hamhor Island used to have these gymkhanas. And she was entered into a dinghy racing contest, which I think she won. And so she clearly got a taste for competition. The war then intervened in her growing up, and obviously honourable members will be only too aware that in 1918 we passed in this place the Representation of People, the People Act. And the tide was turning in terms of votes for women, women's individuality, women expressing themselves. And in 1920, Weybridge Rowing Club decided that they would form a women's section. This was considerably revolutionary at the time. And they formed a women's rowing section. They got a group of young ladies together and trained them in how to row properly, and had the whole women's rowing movement began. In 1925, young Amy Gentry went over to the charity regatta in Belgium, or in the Netherlands, where she competed against France, Belgium and Holland. And in 1927, the sport had developed that much further that they had an 8 competition on the Oxford and Cambridge course between Putney and Mortlake. She wrote at the time that she felt like she was rowing backwards at times. I mean, obviously, literally, she was rowing backwards, but she didn't really feel like she was going anywhere. So dreadful were the conditions. In 1932, her father went to a boat builder and said, "If you build my daughter a boat, will she win?" And the boat builder said, "She will." And indeed she did. And she carried all before her from 1932 to 1934. She became the secretary of the Weybridge Rowing Club, and by 1939 was its chair. And she was the driving force in women's rowing in the country. One of the clubs which had been useful and had adopted this with some enthusiasm was the Vesta Rowing Club, and they set up the first women's regatta. And a gentleman from the Vesta Rowing Club said at the time, "While I do not approve of rowing for women, as they will do it anyway, the best thing I can do would be to help them do it properly." So you can see the sort of attitudes that were at the time. Nevertheless, she was fantastic at it, and she retired from the highest level of the sport in the late 30s. Obviously, the Second World War came around, and in 1939 she became the secretary to Barnes-Wallis. And for those members who are not familiar with the Dam Busters, I have to remind honourable members that Barnes-Wallis was instrumental in developing the bouncing bomb. And the way in which he did it was that he and his secretary, Amy Gentry, would go to Silvermere Lake and he would fire various projectiles from a catapult across the lake, and then he and Amy would row out to collect them in order to see how they fared, sort of a very high-grade stone-skimming competition. And at one stage, Barnes-Wallis was a pretty serious guy, and Amy had to point out to him as they were rowing out to one of the projectiles, she said, "Wallace, you may be in charge, but I am in charge in this boat. Sit down." So, after the war, rowing went from strength to strength. We were represented the European Championships in 1952 and in 1954, carrying all before us at the national and international level. As a slight aside, in the 1954 European Games, which Amy Gentry went over to, she handed out some prizes to one of the crews, to a young lady called Betty Shugbrook. And Betty Shugbrook was a member of the London Rowing Club, and she had met her soon-to-be husband at the London Rowing Club on regatta on Boxing Day. His name was Graham Hill. She went on to be Betty Hill, and she became the only person to be married to and be the mother of a Formula One world racing champion. So Amy was awarded the... she was instrumental in bringing the Euros here, the European Championships here in 1960, and she was awarded the OBE in 1969. She died in June 1976 in Stanwell in my constituency. And the significance of that date is a sad irony, because she didn't quite live to see the moment 1 month later when women were allowed to compete in rowing in the Olympic Games in Montreal. And so if, when honourable members in a month's time, if they happen to be watching the Oxford and Cambridge boat race, when the women's crew goes under Barnes Bridge, in the latter stages of the race, they will pass a huge pub on the south bank of the River Thames, and it is called the White Hart. And that is at the end of White Hart Lane, where Amy Gentry was born. And so, when honourable members see that moment, perhaps they would join me in raising a glass to the remarkable woman, Amy Gentry.
Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the government for having this debate in government time. I had put in for a backbench business debate, as I normally do as backup. I think that now that we have a Labour government, I could probably stop doing that now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I need to apologise for my voice. I was going to blame it on a cold, but actually I was at the Transmission concert yesterday at Wembley Arena, and I was shouting that trans rights are the human rights quite loudly. And also singing along to Beverly Knight's Everything's Going to Be All Right. And it reminded me of a saying that everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. And Madam Deputy Speaker, right now, things are not all right for women. As the Minister stated in her excellent opening speech, women are currently at our most vulnerable globally. It feels worse than it has felt in a very long time. With the influencers and the brain rot of social media and the increasing lack of legislation around bodily autonomy and men influencing boys, as we've heard many times from MPs today, on what a perfect woman should be, with detailed instructions of how to abuse women and girls, we are in serious danger as women, and we need protection. So today is the day, on International Women's Day, Madam Deputy Speaker, to tell some truths. Because for many of us, progress has not been made by us being welcomed in the room. Progress has been made by us taking up room. Progress has been made by us taking up space. And I want to thank all the women in my constituency in Brent who have taken up space. Even when, as women, we're told, you don't belong here. Or we're told they're letting anyone in nowadays, which was said to me by an MP once on the terrace. And that is not the only thing that's been said to me as an MP. I've been told, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I'm too serious. And then I've also been told that I'm not serious enough. I've been told I need to dress up, then been told I need to dress down. I should smile more, or I smile too much. I'm too confident, or I'm not confident enough. I talk about black issues too much, and then I don't talk about black issues enough. Or I talk about women's issues all the time, but I don't talk about men's issues. And the reality is, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been here for all of the International Men's Day debate when there's been nobody on the backbenches from the other side. So nobody can accuse me of not being an equal opportunity debater. Yeah. But the truth is this, that you can't win, and you will never win if you're trying to fit into anyone else's expectations. Some people try to make you feel so small that they try and strip away who you are so that you no longer recognize yourself. And some people, and the hallmark of those people, are the people who are unhappy in their own lives. They often have small appendix, and they will try to put others down. And the worst thing we can do to yourself is to allow that to happen. Because in life as women, we need all the strength that we can get just to survive. I recall, Madam Deputy Speaker, after my cancer diagnosis and whilst writing my book, A Purposeful Life, deciding that I wanted to be Mayor of London. There were many positive responses to that, for which I am eternally grateful, and I'll be tapping them up for the campaign. But, of course, that was mixed with, oh, there's never been a black mayor, and oh, there's never been a female mayor, and what makes you think you can do it? What have you done? What have you delivered? Oh, sorry, as that somebody else was saying that to me. It's a man's job, isn't it? And I should stay in my lane. Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth is my lane is wherever I say it is, and I will slay in my lane, and I will achieve my ambitions, because I have learnt something important on my political journey, that when you give your voice, when you give our voice, when we give our time, when we give our courage, we don't lose, we learn and we gain. And I have gained so much. I have gained friends, I have gained knowledge, and I've gained the power to change things for the better. And I have made it my mission to pave the way for others. I don't always succeed, and sometimes people let you down, but that's just life. But sometimes I do succeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And there are 2 female MPs in this place who I gave their first jobs to in Parliament. My dear friend, the MP for Stratford and Bow, and the MP for West Bromwich. 2 women who are now doing a phenomenal job for their constituents. That is what can happen when you give. When you give, you and others gain. I know what it feels like, Madam Deputy Speaker, not to be taken seriously, to have my experiences dismissed, my views belittled, and for people not recognising the struggle or your greatness. So this International Women's Day debate is time to tell the truth. I have been in many rooms where I've not fitted in, so I've come to accept that, and I have come to embrace standing out. I will wear my bright clothes, Madam Deputy Speaker. This one is from Deborah. I will smile when I am happy, and I will act confident even when at times I may not feel it. The truth of the matter is, when women rise, the system gets better. Women are failed by the system, and by some men and women, time and time again. Whether it is the courts system, or whether it is in Iran, Gaza, Afghanistan, Sudan, UK, or America. Women and girls' lives are in danger all over the globe. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I find it strange that we have misogynistic men who are part of the biggest, wealthiest paedophile gang we have ever seen, and yet no one is in prison. Even though the evidence is there in the Epstein files. Hardly anyone has been arrested. And where they have been arrested, it is not for raping little girls and teenagers. And we should ask ourselves, why is that? How is it that people can protest outside hotels, but they're not protesting outside the Sandringham estate? No matter the colour of your skin or how much money you have in the bank, if you abuse and rape little girls and teenagers and young women, if you're part of a grooming gang, large or small, you should be punished and you should be in prison. And I believe it is our duty in this place to speak up and to ensure that paedophiles are punished without fear or favour. I don't care who they are. I don't care who they're friends with. I don't care if they're royalty. I don't care if they're influential people. It's time to tell the truth and not to pretend that you care about women and girls when you're being selective. A woman is killed every 3 days in the UK and every 10 minutes globally. A woman is raped every 8 minutes in the UK and just seconds globally. I want women and girls to be safe, not just in the UK, but globally around the world. This International Women's Day, I would love for people to give comfort to women who are struggling everywhere, whether it is at war or in the workplace. There is no hierarchy of women. None of us are free until we are all free. None of us are safe until we are all safe. Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth is, you don't know how strong you are until that is the only thing you have left. But you shouldn't need to be strong. You should just be safe. It is also true that women of colour are expected to be strong all of the time, and we are tired. Tired of not being supported, tired of being overlooked, and tired of our pain not being recognised, whether it's in the UK or globally. And as we pour unprecedented amounts of money into AI systems that makes women's lives less safe, let's refocus our efforts on protecting women and girls. And if we do that, if we protect the most vulnerable women, if that is our starting point, Madam Deputy Speaker, then the outcomes will be better, stronger, fairer, more equitable and safer for all. Thank you.
Kirsty Blackburn. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's always difficult to follow the member from Brent East, whose speeches I am generally in awe of, and that was yet another one. A speech that I was also in awe of was the one from the member for Gorton and Denton. Like the member over here, I wish I had delivered a maiden speech that was anywhere close to as good as that. That level of passion for her constituents was very clear, and that understanding of constituents as well. There are so many MPs in here who were first elected who do not understand their constituents or their constituencies, and it's very clear that the new member for Gorton and Denton is one of her people in her constituency and really understands how her patch feels. I think they are very lucky to have such a representative. Madam Deputy Speaker, I thought about how best to do this speech today, whether I would go on a kind of political thing, raging about all of the injustices, whether I would talk about all of the unseen women that there are that are doing all of the heavy lifting that we don't talk about and we don't notice. I thought about how best to put this across, but honestly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've had about the busiest week in Parliament that I've ever had, and I am going to try and give a speech in which I don't cry, and that's my bar today. So if we get to that point, I'll have won. One of my team is called Alma and is one of the most wonderful humans I have ever met. And she was born in Denmark and spent a lot of time in Denmark, and was telling me that in Denmark, International Women's Day is called Kvindernes Kampdag, which I've probably pronounced wrong, but it means Women's Struggle Day or Women's Fight Day. It's about recognising the fight and the struggle that women face, but it's also about fighting and struggling for those women. And I thought that that was such a good thing to think of for all of us in here, about the fact that that fight and that struggle is ongoing, it is not won. And as the member from Brent East said, things are not in a good way right now. Things are less safe than they have been in a very long time. I think we need to continue to support, recognise and fight for those unseen women. we talk about that unseen work sometimes. We talk about the fact that there are women doing jobs that nobody notices. Nobody, but I'm telling you, you would notice if they weren't doing them. You would notice very quickly if they weren't doing them, because things would not work. One of the reasons that we're all standing here today, and the reason that we are able to have this debate today, is because there's a member of House staff who makes sure that we have these debates, that make sure that debates happen. It's her birthday today, and I'm not going to say her name because she'd probably kill me. But I want to recognise that she's one of the many unseen women in this place who ensures that we can do what we do, who ensures that we have got that time and space to be able to stand up and make those speeches, who has made the time on this Thursday for us to be able to speak about the issues that are affecting our constituents, the issues that are affecting women around the world. A number of people have spoken about oppressive states and what is happening in so many countries around the world with the situation systemically, the situation run by the state becoming worse for women. Some of that is because of religious expectations from various different religions requiring having a very strong interpretation, an extreme interpretation of some of the religious texts, and requiring women to act and behave in a certain way. Some of it's not. Some of it's just because we continue to have patriarchal societies throughout the world, and men are historically bigger and stronger than us and able to keep that in place. We've got huge amounts of gendered expectations on young women growing up. It is made worse by the fact that they are on the internet, the fact that the gendered expectations are not just happening in the school classrooms, they're not just happening in television shows that they see, they're happening in games that they play online, they're happening in online spaces that they inhabit, they're happening everywhere, that women are expected to be subservient to men. And a number of us have spoken before about how women have got to be better than men in order to get to the same position. I've spoken before a lot about the phrase hard-working families. And sometimes when people say the phrase hard-working families, they mean middle-class families. They mean people that are earning 40, 50 grand a year. They don't mean people who are working as carers. They don't mean people that are trying to get 4 kids out of the door in the morning with the right shoes on the right feet. They don't mean that. They don't mean the people that are doing those everyday jobs that we desperately need. They don't mean the bus drivers. They don't mean the people working to ensure that all of our lives run smoothly. I think the member from Darlington mentioned earlier on the way that we look at society and the value that we give to roles. And I've been thinking for a long time about the fact that we should really tip this on its head. We should think about which jobs actually do we need. Which jobs do we need people to be doing? We need people to be carers. We need people to look after children in nurseries. We need people to be teachers. We need people to be nurses and doctors. We need people to do all of those public sector roles that we desperately need. But we don't value them. We don't pay them more than the living wage in a lot of cases. Actually, those are the people whose jobs we desperately need or society would fall apart. Yet, for some reason, we continue to think that that's okay, that they continue to be bottom of the pile. These jobs are overwhelmingly jobs that women are in, overwhelmingly. And I think that we need to think about that gendered expectation that women will continue to do all of the hard work and we'll pay them very little for doing that job. Imagine they didn't. Imagine the women went on strike. Imagine every woman that we know that's working in every job that we know went on strike, how quickly society would fall apart if the women stopped doing all of that work that we don't see, which is why we need to fight for them. We need to fight for all of those unseen women doing those unseen jobs. And we need to fight so that we can ensure that it's not just women who are filling those roles. We need equal opportunities at the top of the pile and at the bottom of the pile. We need to be able to lift women out of some of those roles, but we need to be able to ensure that men can take up some of those roles, and then perhaps we'll get more pay for carers if there are more men being carers. There are some, absolutely, but I think that would tip things in a good way. A couple more things in relation to Parliament. I thought it was really interesting having the Defending Democracy Task Force just before this debate. I struggle more than I ever have telling young women to come to Parliament, telling them to become an elected representative. It is harder than it has ever been. Part of that is because of social media. Part of that is because of the toxic climate that there can be, particularly out there, particularly out in the world where, you know, there's so much polarisation and ideological position taking that results in the abuse that women face, the abuse that members from ethnic minority backgrounds face. Standing up in front of a class of young women, a class of people from a variety of different ethnic backgrounds, it's very hard to say to them, this is a great job, you should do it. What you need, what I find myself saying to them is, look, this is a really hard job. This is a job where you will face abuse. It is worth it to make a difference. It is worth it to do that. And I think cross-party, we are genuinely all working together to try to ensure that democracy is defended, that younger people thinking about going into politics or older people thinking about going into politics can truly consider that and take that on without fear that they will be abused. Again, the member for Brent East talked about those expectations on women. And I remember watching a Queen's speech, and I was doing BBC TV when I think it was a Queen's speech, and I was sitting there and the journalist turned to me when Theresa May got out the car and said, what do you think of Theresa May's outfit? And I was like, she looks very resolute, you know. And he said, okay, you're right, I shouldn't have asked you that. I'll ask the man on the panel instead. What do you think of Theresa May's outfit? So that's not the point. That's not the point. It's not about what Theresa May is wearing. It's about what she's doing. It's about the importance of this moment. You know, whether I agree or disagree with the Conservative Prime Minister, she was stepping out of the car as Prime Minister. It was really important. And talking about what she was wearing was not the right thing to do in that moment. As I said, the member for Brent East was talking about those expectations, was talking about being too smiley or not smiley enough, was talking about the fact that we just simply cannot win. No matter what abuse is thrown at me, I guarantee you I have said worse to myself, right? I am my own greatest critic, as many of the women that I meet and that I know across Parliament. As the only woman in the SNP right now, because of being wiped out by you guys, frankly. It's not that we didn't. It's not that we didn't stand lots of women. We stood lots of women. It's just bad electoral luck on our part in relation to that and losing lots of seats. As the only woman in the SNP, finding that fellowship across the House is really difficult right now. Finding that fellowship and support, and so I've been happy to support and to work with people who are doing organising the Women's Caucus, trying to get that off the ground. For people like me and women in other parties that are particularly small parties who don't have those relationships naturally within our parties, who can't find those people unless we happen to bump into each other in the tea room, we don't get that in group meetings. I think it's really important that we push forward with the Women's Caucus in order that women can have that place where we get support. And I commend all of the members that have worked really hard on trying to bring forward the Women's Caucus. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was menopause, because members are right, it's not talked about enough. It's not something that I ever would have heard discussed in my home when I was a child. It's not something that I knew existed. I mean, I'm sure I knew that something happened at the end, but I didn't know. You know, I'm sure I knew that periods stopped at some point, but I didn't really know much beyond that. The more I've got groups of women that I speak to that are growing older, getting past their kind of 30s, the more I've learned about menopause. And I just want to say, how unfair is it that itchy ears are a symptom of menopause? I mean, you know, you've got everything else to deal with. You're dealing with so much rubbish. Right? I'm just telling you all, if you don't know, itchy ears are a symptom of menopause. And I think that's my kind of public service announcement for the day. So if you hear women in your life talking about having itchy ears, just be kind to them, give them a bit of support. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's really important that we hold each other up, that we support one another, that we work on a cross-party basis to further the rights of women, to ensure that those unseen women are supported, and to ensure that people working in traditional women's roles that are historically belonging to, mostly held by women, that we pay them an awful lot more money in order to recognise the contribution that they deliver.
Yeah.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It gives me great pleasure and pride to contribute to this debate today. This is probably, okay, I've only been here 18 months, but this is like one of my favourite debates in the Chamber, because it is that privilege of being able to listen to the experiences from across the House, to recognise the women who make a difference in everybody's local communities, the difference globally, and it's always inspiring. And it also gives me great pleasure to follow on from the member from Aberdeen North, because of the conversation that we had earlier on in this week, where I think I uttered the phrase that we, in this place, we cross paths more often than we cross swords. And, okay, the proverbial verbal swords, not the physical ones, I'll leave those for the Master of Arms, but a recognition that we are not, whilst we are here as women, and this is the most diverse parliament ever that there's ever been, we are not homogenous. We all bring different things to this place. We all bring a different perspectives, and this Parliament is stronger for it. Yeah. And that's why I also feel really privileged to be able to hear the maiden speech of the member for Gorton and Denton, and welcome what she brings to this place as well, and welcome her to her place. This year's theme for International Women's Day, as has been said, is Give to Gain, but also the UN theme of recognising rights, justice and action for all women. It reminds us that we must never accept that the work is done. We must never forget that what advances we have made can still be lost. There are still far too many women and girls across the world who do not have rights, who cannot access justice, and who are denied education, healthcare and financial independence. In the short time available to me today, I want to highlight some of the women of my constituency of Cumbernauld, Kirk and Tulip, who embody that theme. The women who work every day for the rights, well-being and opportunities of others. Women like Linda, Lorna and Christine, and all the women at Tony's Safe Space, an organisation which was founded 4 years ago today to provide support for those affected by suicide and bereavement and mental health. A group of women turning personal tragedy into compassion and practical help for others is an extraordinary act of strength in itself. Women like Anne Miller of Kilsyth Senior Citizens and the Old Library Management Group, a real force of nature in the community, working tirelessly to ensure older people remain connected, active and supported, and been known to chase me down when I've been doing my surgeries, and who's somebody I always love to see. Women like Isabel Hughes in the Welcome Group at St Patrick's in Kilsyth, who provide support, respite and friendship for people living with memory loss and for their families. And whilst Grace is a woman's name in itself, this also stands for the Group Recovery Aftercare Community Enterprise in Eastern Bartonshire, where Linny and Yvette support adults who are in recovery from life trauma. It's an organisation rooted in lived experience, providing therapy, recovery support and aftercare, and a fundamental belief that the need for aftercare never stops. Is standing as a powerful force for good in those rebuilding their lives. Those women and so many others across Cumbernauld and Kirkcaldy give their time, energy and compassion to support others. That work, as the member from Aberdeen North said earlier, happens quietly, without recognition, and its impact is profound. They strengthen communities, they lift people up, they remind us all of the power of kindness and solidarity, and that's why International Women's Day matters. It allows us to celebrate those contributions, whilst remembering that progress has never been inevitable. Every right a woman today enjoys has been hard won by those who came before us. And as we celebrate those achievements, we must also recognise the work that's still to be done, tackling violence against women and girls, closing the gender pay gap, and ensuring every girl has the right and the opportunity to live, lead, learn and thrive. So today, I place on record my sincere thanks to the women across Cumbernauld and Kirkcaldy who give so much of themselves in service to others. Their work reminds us that progress is not just delivered by government. It's built every day in our communities by the people who choose to care, choose to support and choose to stand up for others. If we truly want a world where women and girls gain equality, justice and opportunity, then we must continue to match their commitment with our action.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton on her maiden speech. It was an eloquent speech that actually made us think that you've been here for several years. I really enjoyed your description of your constituency and the people and organisations that you are now representing. And I hope that the Honourable Member doesn't get involved in fixing the plumbing and the plastering in this place. Her place is in this chamber, and I'm sure in being here she'll make a name for herself and be a really good champion for her constituents. This debate is an opportunity to mark the progress we have made to improve gender equality and empower women in all areas of life. It is important that we also monitor the progress and assess where there is much work to do. The Gender Equality Index is a helpful tool which looks at gender equality across all authorities in the UK. Wokingham scores in the top 10% of local authorities for women's outcome, meaning women in Wokingham generally have better equality in pay, life expectancy, job progression and skills compared to women nationally. However, specifically in Wokingham, there is still a significant gap in pay between women and men, in job progression and in participation in our civil society. This needs to change. It is, of course, very welcome that women are doing well in Wokingham, but that counts for little if their outcomes are still far behind the outcomes of men. That is why there is still so much work that needs to be done to ensure that the gender equality is improved and then strengthened for this generation and for many generations to come. A very serious issue is where gender equality plays out in shocking and violent ways. Through casework, I have seen many women in Wokingham are victims of abuse and violence, often linked to an imbalance in financial and physical power. It is a great shame that many women who are victims of domestic abuse feel unsupported and neglected by the police, the courts and other services, and are often left relying on charities. That is why the government needs to ensure survivors of violence against women and girls are properly supported in the criminal justice system, with mandatory training for police and prosecutors on the impact of trauma. The government must also ensure that there is sustainable funding for services that support domestic abuse survivors. On this, I must highlight the vital work done by Vicky Robertson and her charity Kaleidoscopic UK, who are based in Wokingham and help women who have experienced domestic abuse across the Thames Valley. I have also seen through casework that so much of homelessness stems from domestic abuse. This is because of a financial imbalance, as women often have to care for their children and the accommodation offered is unsuitable for a family. The government must take action to ensure that victims are not forced to return to perpetrators due to inadequate temporary accommodation. It is clear that while some progress has been made to close the gender gap, there is still so much more to do to make our communities safer for women and to level the playing field. Thank you.
Tonya Antoniazzi. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a real privilege to be here to speak today to mark International Women's Day. And also I'd like to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton on her maiden speech. I remember when I made my maiden speech here nearly 9 years ago. Time flies. Nearly 9 years ago, I remember just above me here were my mum, my brother, my younger brother and my son, aged just 13 at the time. And I don't know who she has with her today. However, I'd like to pay tribute to family members. My mother, who we lost last September. I just wanted to say, if it wasn't for other women supporting women and their brothers and sisters and children, we wouldn't be able to stand here today to do our job. So I wish her all the very best in her career. There have been many advances, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the fight for women's equality in recent decades, and indeed much welcome and needed action on male violence against women and girls since this Labour government came into office. There has, however, been a frustrating stasis on some issues, meaning that they have worsened. Sexual exploitation has been showing a clear and sustained rise in the United Kingdom, with increasing numbers of women identified as victims. We're seeing more UK national victims of sexual exploitation and at a younger age. Yet women and girls exploited in the sex trade remain to be amongst the most neglected in our policy discussions and reforms, and so it is of them I want to talk about today. Because these women matter, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the harms they experience are extreme. Technological change has reshaped our world, but it has also created new opportunities for sexual exploitation to proliferate on a scale we have never seen before, because our legislation has not kept pace and is not capable of keeping pace. Despite it being illegal to place a prostitution advert in a phone box, that same advert can legally be published for profit on a website. Into this gap, traffickers have moved quickly, pimping websites which act as a vast online brothel, drive demand and supercharge the sex trafficking trade by making it easier and quicker for pimps to advertise their victims. They make it as easy to order a woman to abuse as it is to order a takeaway, and they operate freely and openly because our legislation allows this. A report published just weeks ago by the Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner shows how adult service websites don't just host exploited and trafficked women, they provide the infrastructure to initiate, scale and normalise their abuse. Nearly 63,000 listings for women were recorded across 12 of these sites at one point in time, which attracted almost 41.7 million visitors in a month. And this, Madam Deputy Speaker, is just a fraction of an even larger marketplace because additional sites are available to users. Nearly 60% of the adverts analysed displayed 3 or more indicators of trafficking or exploitation, which, for example, include multiple ads linked to the same phone number and new-to-area language.
Behind these numbers are real and severe harms endured by women exploited on these sites. Survivors interviewed for this report talked about how they were groomed, controlled and advertised online without their knowledge or consent. A survivor who was exploited alongside other women said, "None of us had access to the emails from buyers. They came directly through him. He answered us if he was us, and then he would send me a message saying, 'Oh, this person, you know, this is where you're going to meet them, and this is what you have agreed to do.' This use and abuse of women is directly enabled and amplified by these sites' very design, which, for example, enable third-party facilitation. Survivors spoke of how traffickers and abusive partners created profiles, arranged bookings and made profits while women themselves were controlled and intimidated. Despite third-party facilitation being a known red flag for trafficking, Ofcom guidance ignores this and portrays it as a safety measure. Profiles on these sites also give the illusion of independence to mask deeper exploitation. Another survivor said she was being raped on a webcam, essentially, and of course, the people watching aren't aware of that. The profile is written so it sounds as if I'm independent and enjoying it. How do you go behind a webcam to make sure that that woman isn't being coerced? Meanwhile, buyers on some forums openly discuss which women are controlled and the benefits this has for them. As another survivor explained, you will see men sharing about, "These girls are trafficked. You can get away with doing this to her. It's just right there on the page." This is the selling and abuse of women in plain sight on an industrial scale, Madam Deputy Speaker, enabled by our legislative framework. This is totally unacceptable. These women deserve so much better. The Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner is absolutely right in saying that these websites are ready-made tools for abuse and that the toughest action must be taken against them. The All-Party Parliamentary Group on Commercial Exploitation, which I chair, has been sounding the alarm on pimping websites and their harms for quite some time. And the truth is, the current legislation and regulatory guidance are not acting or preventing this harm, and it is traffickers, pimps and punters operating with near total impunity who benefit. Women are abused as if they are objects and suffer acutely. We, Madam Deputy Speaker, are failing them. So I urge the Government to pay close attention to the report's findings and to act urgently on its recommendations for a robust review into them, one that includes survivors, and this needs to be a prompt one. There's a lot of evidence already out there, and the longer we wait, the more women and girls are suffering as a result. And what's more, the scale and ease of access of this online market is not just facilitating exploitation, it is also more widely fuelling the dangerous rise in misogyny by normalising the idea that women exist to be bought, used and discarded. In an age where prostitution is glamorised, boys and men are repeatedly exposed to platforms that present women as sexual commodities, and it inevitably shapes their attitudes. The scale of demand for pimping websites should give us serious pause for thought in that respect as well. Shutting these sites down has a fundamental role to play, not just in preventing horrific exploitation, but also in shifting the attitudes of men and boys to promote healthy and respectful relationships. If we are, Madam Deputy Speaker, to tackle male violence against women and girls, these websites have to be shut down.
John Grady.
I'm obliged, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by paying tribute to the member for Gorton and Denton for what was a profound speech. The member used the phrase, "Our humanity is the same," and in that there is a profound truth. And we must recognise in this House that there are people who disagree with that and want to tear us apart. And as someone who has a diverse constituency, covering many different races, faiths and differences of views, I treasure that diversity because I do believe our humanity is the same. And we in this House must be very careful to fight against those who want to shatter that and who want to tear us apart and take us significantly back in time. And our humanity is the same as those women and girls that my friend, the member for North East Fife, spoke of, and as a fellow office bearer on the APPG for Afghan women and girls. We must do much more to support women and girls in Afghanistan. And we must look afresh at things like international law to criminalise the mistreatment of women and girls to such evil degrees. And the Minister rightly mentioned the fight by trade unionists for equal pay. Now, the first socialist in my party was my great-auntie Nellie, who led equal pay strikes in the 30s in Pontefract, in the licorice factories. And she became friends with Barbara Castle, who, of course, is responsible for the Equal Pay Act. And we should all be very angry, but the fact of the matter is that women now are paid less than men. There is still considerable structural inequality of pay. But now, our fight for equality, which I believe is shared by all of us, and we must all share, faces new and much more dangerous threats. And we must redouble our efforts. And we shouldn't just be angry about it. We are legislators. We must legislate and then see that legislation acted on. Because otherwise, the future for women and girls, my daughter and the other children in my constituency and across the world, will become bleaker when we want to see progress. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to speak about domestic abuse today. 1 in 4 women in the UK will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. And in Glasgow East, I work with survivors, and I see how, in particular, housing instability is a barrier to my constituents fleeing abuse. And I'm very dismayed of the lack of support provided by the housing sector in Scotland to survivors. Survivors do not receive trauma-informed care and are not supported into safe, settled homes. Instead, I've met women who have suffered from terrifying sexual violence, who have been forced into social housing in an awful condition and then faced months of unknown male workmen coming to their new home. And the social landlords have been aware that the women in question have suffered. And the women shouldn't have to ask for female work people to come to work in their homes. It should be a matter of course. Women in my seat waiting months for house transfers, meaning that their abusers know exactly where they live. A particular legal problem is when women are not included on the tenancy for their rented home. This means that they do not have legal rights to stay in their home, and when the relationship comes to an end, the women face eviction and homelessness. And this is why the Scottish Parliament passed Part 2 of the Domestic Abuse Protection Scotland Act 2021 almost 5 years ago, Madam Deputy Speaker. This gives social landlords powers to transfer tenancies from abusers to survivors. But almost 5 years after it was passed, we are still waiting for this to be made legally enforceable by the Scottish Government. I've been pressing the Scottish Government on this, and in January I wrote to the press about this disgraceful delay, and the next day the Scottish Government announced they would finally bring these provisions into force. Despite this 5-year delay, social landlords have had no formal guidance from the Scottish Government about how the provisions will operate in practice. They do not know how the courts or the police will approach this, and this is essential for social landlords. A poorly thought-out implementation will put survivors at further risk. I have raised these concerns with the SNP Scottish Government, and I am still awaiting a response. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are organisations who do fantastic work to ensure survivors' housing stability. The Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance, DAHA, provide the infrastructure, training and monitoring necessary for social landlords to recognise and tackle domestic abuse. This works very well in England. Just north of here, Islington Council have very successfully worked with DAHA and significantly improved the outcomes for survivors of domestic abuse. And in Glasgow, social landlords need help and support to make the improvements that they must make. And the social landlords I recognise do recognise the importance of this. I am determined to see survivors of domestic abuse get much better help and support. And so I've asked social landlords to meet with DAHA, and I'm pleased that 2 housing associations in my seat, Wheatley and Govan Hill, as well as the Scottish Housing Regulator, have expressed an interest in learning more and are willing to meet with DAHA. In agreeing to do so, they are demonstrating their commitment to supporting survivors of domestic abuse. I will encourage others to do the same. Madam Deputy Speaker, we must do much, much better in Scotland for the survivors of domestic abuse, and I am determined to continue to work hard on this. Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to speak about one other topic on my seat. I am very proud of the work of one of my local charities, Scottish Sports Futures. They do great work with young people in my seat. In particular, they encourage young women to speak up about their experience of violence against women and girls. And this means that the young men in their programmes learn about what they have to do to treat women as their equals and to treat them with respect. I cannot praise Scottish Sports Futures enough for working on this and giving those young women a voice. And several of those young women in their programmes spoke with bravery about this at their annual awards event last week. At the event, a young woman from Barrowfield, just round in my seat, spoke courageously about violence against women and girls and the issue of youth violence more generally, which has a profound impact on girls in my constituency, in particular following the killing of a young boy in my seat 2 years ago called Corey McCrimmon. His family faced their grief, by the way, with profound dignity and courage. I'm proud of all my young constituents, Madam Deputy Speaker. And politics is a matter of morals, and it's a moral issue. And my moral obligation as their Member of Parliament is to do everything within my power to tackle violence against women and girls.
Dr. Marie Tidball.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to all the women in this chamber who really have slayed in their lane in the debate today. When they amputated my leg, they amputated a part of me. I see my body and I feel disgust, repulsion. I fear that my amputation took away my femininity, my ability to be yearned for, my womanhood pauperized, trapped in a body that does not reflect my mind or myself. Anorexia, unplanned, like an addiction, crept upon me. I ate less and became thinner. My wish, that nobody would notice my disability and I would simply disappear. A physical escapism. For the first time in my life, the eating disorder gave me control over my body. The way it looked, the way it felt. My frustration about my physical form turned into obsession. The obsession fed me where food did not. It gave me power. Success became feeling bones left behind under taut skin, knowing my pelvis protruded below a small waist. Cheekbones were prominent on a smileless face. Anorexia was about the relationship between a despised body and a disciplined mind. Eventually, that mind was consumed too. A warped wasteland where fear and anger roamed. There was no escape from or for myself. Weight, 4 stone, 10 pounds. My body was breaking down. I was losing my hair and my period stopped. My menstruation ending ultimately saved me and my life. Somewhere at the back of my head, I knew I wanted to have children. Eventually, I took the pill. My period started again. I ate more. My desire to be a mother gave me a reason to get better, signalled a future and made me no choice once again. I wrote these passages 20 years ago in my early 20s while recovering from my last major surgery to my legs. I was anorexic for 4 years from being age 14. And whilst I was physically better by the time I went to university, it took me until my mid-20s to have a healthy relationship with food. And I'm not alone. Over the years, I've spoken to other disabled women about their experiences of eating disorders, linked to their own body, image, and identity. Devastatingly, 20 years later, 2 decades after I wrote those passages, social attitudes towards sex, relationships, and disability remain an enormous taboo, which means disabled women are still going through this anguish, damaging their mental health, causing them to self-harm and eroding their self-esteem. Actor and disability activist Melissa Johns, who has an upper body limb difference, shared her story, how she has a strong history of loathing her body. But that never came from her. It came from society telling her that her body was wrong. Too often, Madam Deputy Speaker, disabled women's bodies do not count. Mum, social media influencer and wheelchair user Sophie Bradbury Cox showed me just some comments made on her social media about the fact that she is a disabled mother, including, "There's something horribly unethical about having children when you're not able to care for yourself." These damaging attitudes and the lack of awareness of these issues are leading disabled women to face barriers in public services, including accessing sexual and reproductive and maternity care. In the last year, I've met 2 incredible disabled women. Carly, a Paralympiad, and Sarah, an occupational therapist. Both have cerebral palsy, and neither found out they were pregnant until their 2nd and 3rd trimesters, respectively, because none of their clinicians considered that they might be pregnant. Carly Tate, who competed in the 2016 Paralympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, soon discovered she was pregnant after retiring from professional sport. This was immediately followed by a lot of questions about whether she was capable of giving birth, a line of conversation she faced throughout her pregnancy. Some people seemed to ignore her pregnancy altogether. On the last day before her maternity leave, a colleague approached her saying, "Oh my gosh, you're pregnant!" showing an ableist view that someone like Carly couldn't possibly be pregnant. But disabled women are making babies, having babies, and being brilliant mothers. Against the odds. Odds that mean we face a 44% higher likelihood of stillbirth. That's why I've called on the Secretary of State for Health to put inclusive maternity care for disabled women at the heart of our women's health strategy, so that our womanhood no longer remains invisible. But we need to go further and finally embed the social model of disability into women's health care and implement the recommendations for the UK government made by the United Nations Committee on People with Disabilities in 2017. That committee found that the rights of disabled women and girls had not been systematically mainstreamed into either the gender equality or disability agendas, with disabled women facing multiple barriers to accessing sexual and reproductive health services and professionals. I've lost count of the number of disabled people I've ended up mentoring who self-harmed and attempted suicide because of these issues of sex, relationships and disability not being discussed, and the lack of services and absence of professional expertise to support them. I'm proud that our government's reforms will engender a high-quality and inclusive curriculum for all, but this must include the representation of disabled people in PSHE lessons in school. We must turn the tide of public attitudes towards disabled people, particularly empowering young disabled people to have more positive perceptions of self. But there are reasons to be hopeful. Green shoots of representation are appearing on our screens. EastEnders is currently covering a storyline about a pregnant woman who is a wheelchair user. This season's Bridgerton featured a subplot with Hazel, a maid played by Gracie McGonigal, and her love interest with dashing footman John, without the series ever even mentioning Hazel's limb difference. Instagram has become a burgeoning social media platform for brilliant disabled women, supercharging representation of disability and desire, of being proud and empowered about the intrinsic beauty of our bodies and ourselves. They are boldly forging the conversation about us being loved and in love, powering the narrative around disability and dating, elucidating new language about being in interabled couples, navigating difficult conversations and acceptance. Disability no longer cast as absence, but complete, full-bodied presence. To be loved is to be seen. It is high time our society sees disabled women's whole selves, for only then will we create a society which treats disabled women with the dignity and respect we deserve.
Yeah.
Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier on, the member for Aberdeen North, as part of her speech, mentioned that it can be difficult at times to advise people to come into the roles that we all do. I actually think she would be well served by just playing people what we've heard in the House today. This debate has been of the highest quality, and I thank everybody for their contributions so far. It's been a genuine pleasure to be here and listening and part of it. We've had the whole gamut of everything. We've had people just taking the opportunity to big up their own constituencies. The member for South Derbyshire, the member for Spelthorne, think did excellently. And I'm not going to get everybody, by the way, because I can't remember everybody's constituency, but I'm going to do my best. But we had people just taking the opportunity just to celebrate wonderful things in the country and those wonderful people who saw a glass ceiling and jumped higher, and it was wonderful to be part of that. But we've also had a debate where people didn't shy away from the really difficult things that we must do. I'd like to thank the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for her intervention, as well as my honourable friend for Glasgow West. Glasgow East! It's not gone well already. But two members who took the opportunity to go to actually talk about some really difficult things as well. And obviously, I am absolutely going to thank the honourable member for Penistone and Stockbridge for her powerful personal testimony. She is always somebody who I enjoy listening to in the chamber, and I thank her very much for her contributions today. The debate today serves many of those purposes. It gives us the opportunity to celebrate what is great, but it also gives us the opportunity to talk about where our society and our systems have failed women for far too long. Unfortunately, that's my role today. Because I do want to come and raise the issue of what the system has let down far too many people for far too long, and that is in the crimes of Mohammed Fayed. And I'm very specifically talking about the crimes of Mohammed Fayed because I do not want to talk about him. Today is about the proud survivors who have done all they can to bring his crimes to light. Fayed is the former owner of Harrods. He was a sexual predator. He trafficked and sexually abused hundreds of women over decades with near complete impunity. Well over 400 survivors have already come forwards, and every day more women take the brave decision to do so. Yesterday, the honourable member for North East Fife powerfully described Fayed as Britain's Epstein. It's a characterisation that I and she have heard many times from survivors, particularly as we now co-chair the all-party parliamentary group for the survivors of Fayed and Harrods. And it's also very good to see another other officers, and no, I don't know your constituency, so I'm just going to welcome you to your place. Apologies to the honourable member. The scale of the crimes committed by this predator, and I will not call him a man because real men respect women. The scale of the crimes by this predator is staggering, but it is a mistake to think that it is the work of one bad human. Fayed was supported by a network of enablers. He died having escaped justice, but there are scores of people who can and must be held to account. They include employees who identified, groomed and trafficked women for the abuse, security staff who harassed and intimidated survivors into silence, lawyers who churned out non-disclosure agreement after non-disclosure agreement after non-disclosure agreement, and nobody thought to do anything. Doctors who performed invasive medical exams and reported...
Order. And apologies for interrupting the honourable gentleman. As there is one live civil case, can I just encourage the honourable gentleman to exercise caution in what he says? Is it perfectly okay to say anything about Mr Fayed, who is dead?
I thank the Chair for her guidance there, and it is really important, and I thank her for that, because there are some cases still ongoing. I will be talking about the Metropolitan Police in a minute, but it is clear that we must do better. For far too long, survivors have been ignored. That can't continue, and it must not continue. And I'm really grateful to the Minister for Safeguarding, who is set to meet with survivors very soon. And I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment yesterday to meet survivors as well. It's taken far too long to get to this stage, but I'm very glad to see that things are finally starting to move. I've had the privilege of meeting dozens of women who have taken that very brave step and come out and been able to put themselves in a place where they can disclose to parliamentarians and people they've never met before, because it is their tenacity and their strength that has been fundamental to driving this agenda forwards and to seeing the advances that we've made recently. I know I'm very grateful to all survivors, as I'm sure everybody in the APPG is also, but we must never take the trust that they have given us for granted. So far, the APPG has run a consultation with survivors, and we're really pleased that we've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of responses to that, because we are very clear that there is a huge network of people who have been wronged in so many ways by so many systems, and it is astonishing how almost every time we have a meeting, there is something else, because the scale of the failings here cuts right across civil society, across enormous parts of the state, and there is a huge amount that needs to be done to give recompense to some people who have been so poorly served for so long. I must also place on record my thanks to the Survivors Trust, who have been working with us and have provided invaluable support to ensure that we are working in a safe way, bearing in mind the trauma that survivors have suffered. I'm very eager to, in coming months, work with people from right across this house, right across the other place, and actually anybody who wants to be involved, to make sure that we keep up a drumbeat of evidence about the scales of these crimes.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
Absolutely, I'll give way.
Very grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way. He is rightly and powerfully talking about the Thamesmead survivors and giving thanks to Survivors Trust, who have given us such invaluable support as we navigate how we manage a very difficult APPG. Can I also talk about just two amazing women, our researchers, Catherine and Jessie, who keep us right, keep us grounded, and have done a huge power of work while we work out how we will get the PPG forward and take the Secretariat forward.
I am so thankful to the Honourable Member for raising both Jessie and Catherine, who are acting as the Secretariat in a very difficult space, in and around other very busy jobs. And I think it's very, very, very clear, certainly to me, and I know to the Honourable Member, that without their hard work, we would not have been able to they are far too good. I've completely lost my place now. Give me a second. As we move forwards, we are regularly reminded by survivors that for far too long, parts of their stories were ignored. For far too long, actually, often their entire story was ignored. They're very clear that things do need to change, the thing needs to move fastly. One of the things that comes up most regularly is the police investigation. I'm really glad that the Met, along with forces in Scotland and in France, are investigating. The Met has now confirmed that it is interviewing suspects on suspicion of trafficking, and that is vitally important, because survivors really regularly bring up that that was not being taken seriously enough, and I'm very, very, very glad that it now is. That focus is vitally important to maintaining the trust of survivors, or what trust is left between survivors and the Met. They do still need reassurance, though, that the force is truly grasping the scale of that issue, that they are truly working on this as fast as they can, and there is oftentimes a frustration raised with us that the updates from the Met appear to be, we'll give you another update in 3 months, and that update is, there'll be another update in 3 months. 3 months is not a short amount of time, and when it's the third or fourth or fifth time that happening, it undermines people's trust that this will ever come to a head and allow justice to happen. Just before I close, I would like to thank all members who've spoken about Firehead's crimes in this chamber, and there's been a number of people in various different formats. All those people who joined the APPG, all those people who've spoken to me about this. It's been a real learning curve for me over the last year or so. It's been really challenging, and that's not to say it's not more challenging for other people, but it's been really challenging for me. But it's also been a place where I think I've really appreciated people coming to that and showing that trust, and hopefully I want to be able to repay that as time goes by and move things forwards in this space for them. Earlier on, though, the few members mentioned that the theme for International Women's Day has been rights, justice and action. And I think that we can really show here that this predator took rights away from far too many people. They deserve that justice, and it really is time to see that action to get that justice delivered. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I'm expecting the front bench to be called round about 4:30, maybe a little later, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4. It's either 6 or 7 members waiting to speak. So perhaps members who are still waiting could confine their remarks to 6 or 7 minutes so that everyone can get in. Dr. Lauren Sullivan.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's my privilege to speak in this debate today, and I want to pay tribute to the women here, the men here, particularly to the member of Penistone and Stocksbridge for her powerful and moving account and sharing her experiences. You're a voice to so many, and there will be action because you are here. Thank you. So, International Women's Day. From Gravesham in my community, I've met with obviously many amazing women. I just want to mention a couple before I move on to the substantive part of what I want to speak about. So, Nagina Hussain is an absolutely phenomenal woman, and last week I recently met with over 100 women and had a very beautiful, wonderful evening together where we shared in food, the breaking of a fast, and it was just phenomenal. So I just want to pay tribute to her, as well as our business leaders. So Susan Hassan from Nels CAF, who I nominated for the MP Heroes, which is Samantha's programme in partnership with NatWest. And just to say that she's an institution of business and a business leader, as well as Sylvia Mead, who brought wonderful Gravesham businesses up to visit me in Parliament this week. Again, it's about women coming together, bringing communities together. Now, there are many, many more, and women in Gravesham do great things, Madam Deputy Speaker, and just one I'm going to tell you a little bit about. So, Catherine Green, she grew up in Gravesend, went to Gravesend Grammar School for Girls, went on to university, completing natural sciences. She earned her PhD and completed many fellowships. Was part of the team at the Jenner Institute who developed the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. And she worked with Sarah Gilbert, and we thank them for using their talents, their expertise. When the world needed them, they were there. So I'd like to thank and recognise them for that. Yeah. Now, not all women in science have been recognised. And in celebrating women and science, I just want to pay tribute to some women that haven't been recognised. So, Ada Lovelace, who is the mother and inventor, founder of computers. She was only recognised 100 years after. Absolutely. Rosalind Franklin, who was the chemist, an X-ray crystallographer, not credited or valued for her research, but it was her X-ray image that showed that DNA is a double helix. Alice Ball, who was an African-American scientist, chemist, who found a leprosy treatment that was stolen and written up as the Dean method, later retracted, but still. And Marie Tharp, who is the mother of plate tectonics. So literally, these women are absolutely credible, but their names and contributions need to be recognised. The UN research shows that global scientific community, only a third of women make up that science community, and only 1 in 10 of those researchers are women in leadership roles. Why? Why is that? Well, women face a set of different challenges. Now, one of those challenges is the motherhood penalty, and that's from pregnancy and beyond. So there are structural issues. So in science, PhD students receive a stipend, and they are not employed, so they don't get those access to maternity rights or government childcare currently. As postdocs, and as maternity time is not really factored in. They're 2-year contracts. So if you need to step out for 6 months, a year, what do? Put your research on pause? Somebody else comes in and finishes it? What that means is that there is less papers, less impact, less likely to see progress. Now, it is possible, and there are many women that have suffered through it, waited and delayed having families until they have tenure in that permanent position. But it doesn't need to be this hard. And then when children grow up, so that's the pregnancy part, half of responders in the UK report for carers in STEM report that they had to cancel their travel plans because of caring responsibilities. I've had it myself, an experiment you spent months planning, nursery ring up, come and collect your child, the aerial. Okay. Researchers in the field say that they don't travel to those international conferences where they network, where you bring the ideas together because of caring responsibilities. It's fine, we do it because we look after our families, but all that means is we are then 1 step behind. Now others, like me, took a career break. Now, I just want to declare an interest here. I was, not currently, was a recipient of a Daphne Jackson Fellowship. And why are they amazing, Madam Deputy Speaker? They are phenomenal because they help women and men return to science. Now, it was named after Daphne Jackson, an English nuclear physicist, the first female physics professor in the UK, University of Surrey, the age of 34. Phenomenal. And she thought that qualified women who are unemployed or underemployed following a career break for family commitments represent an appalling waste of talent and investment in their initial education. Couldn't agree more. Many such women are eager to return to their original careers or to field activity for which their initial education is relevant. Daphne Jackson Fellowships provide that retraining so that they can return on a part-time basis. And here I just want to pay tribute and thank the Daphne Jackson Fellowship as well as the Francis Crick Institute for supporting many women back into research. Now, after a meeting with the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology about my career and the choices of leaving science to raise a family, then try and return and just wiggle everything through and try and make it work, she launched yesterday a new charter to support women in research. And this is a call for funding bodies, all funding bodies, to step up to include 52 weeks maternity leave for PhD funders that the UKRI are also supporting. It's about raising the bar, a rising tide lifted all boats, and it's to improve paternity leave as well. She also announced an increase of £4 million now to Daphne Jackson's. That's over 100% extra. How many returners to science will that mean? That's incredible. Now, this charter is a direction of travel. It's a marker. We're not done. This is a call for women researchers in the UK to tell us what else can we do? How can we work together to make those changes to keep science and scientists, improve science for everyone? Now, in my concluding remarks, I just want to speak to all those young women and girls who are curious about science. You want to help people, save the world. Do not doubt yourself. The country needs you. And finally, to the men who support us, who let us embrace our talents, thank you. Good men never finish last, but they help us all improve everybody's quality of life. I believe the profession of science has the ability to improve lives beyond measure. Thank you to the scientists who are making a difference. We see you and we thank you.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank all of those who've contributed in this and other debates this week, including my honourable friend from Penistone and Stockbridge and my honourable friend from Warrington North, who this week have shown true bravery and should be an inspiration to us all. I also want to welcome the honourable member from Gorton and Denton to her place and for her passionate speech. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to start by thanking and celebrating the amazing women who have played and still play a part in my life, including friends, family and my fabulous staff. They are truly inspirational in the love, support and grounding that they give to me, and I hope that they know that I would not be here and could not do this job without them. Madam Deputy Speaker, this International Women's Day I want to celebrate the women of Portsmouth, my city, and a city celebrating a truly special milestone of 100 years as a city this year. 100 years of community resilience and remarkable women getting on with the job and making our city the place it is. Madam Deputy Speaker, Portsmouth has traditionally been a city that celebrated its people's achievements, but documented by its naval dockyard, its history has often been a masculine one. But the women have always been there, and as my honourable friend from Aberdeen North said, we'd certainly notice if they weren't. Teachers, doctors, nurses, city councillors, factory and shop workers, small business owners, faith leaders and volunteers, all pioneering equal rights at work and all quietly cracking on and holding their families and their communities together. They just didn't and often still don't get the recognition that they should deserve. Some of you may notice that I often wear a necklace, and it says, Madam Deputy Speaker, Pompey Bell. When I was teaching, a group of girlfriends in the NUT and I began wearing them together, partly in tribute to the women who during the First and Second World War kept my city's heart beating whilst the men served abroad, but also as a quiet reminder that we were never facing things alone and that together we can achieve so much more. Now, whenever I put on this necklace, I feel like I'm carrying the support of those women with me, women who are kind, intelligent, determined, and women who get things done. These necklaces are also made by Hip Pip Hooray, a brilliant woman-owned local business, and that's local creativity celebrating our women. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, to mark our city century, I'm proud to be joining forces with others, including my honourable friend from Portsmouth South, to launch the 100 Pompey Bells, a campaign to truly recognise the unsung amazing heroines of our city. 100 Pompey Bells, who are the women who show up every single day, the women who don't seek the spotlight, but the women whom without Portsmouth simply would not function. These women, Madam Deputy Speaker, are in all parts of my city, and of all ages and of all backgrounds, and I'm privileged to meet so many of them in this role as the Portsmouth North Member of Parliament. And I'm so often very humbled, many times reduced to tears, at all of the very proudness and the strength, the openness, the trust and the resilience that they demonstrate day after day, night after night, week after week. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, with this year's theme of Give to Gain, I want to give recognition to the absolute queens in my city, because my city really does gain from them. Nominations will be open soon, and I'd love to see as many local women as possible get involved. I'd love to see their friends, their families, their colleagues, their neighbours put their names forward, because we know too often they will not do it themselves. So that we can celebrate them and all that they do, from breaking barriers in science to running food banks, teaching and coaching our children, caring for our most vulnerable, running our small and large businesses, and simply holding our communities together. Madam Deputy Speaker, Portsmouth women have always been extraordinary, and they've always been proud. So I'd like to place on record to every Pompey Bell in this house and beyond, thank you for being you, for all you do for others and for our city.
Amens.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's been an absolutely excellent debate with so many brilliant contributions, but there are three in particular I would just like to single out. The first is the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton on an absolutely brilliant maiden speech. I am sure she will continue to make many colourful and inspiring contributions in the years ahead in this place, and it's always a joy to welcome another Northern woman to this chamber. Also to my honourable friend, the member for Brent East, pick whatever lane she would like. I will gladly follow. The more important thing is she keeps driving ahead. And the third one is to the member for Aberdeen North, who reminds us that whatever our differences, we always have more in common than that which divides us. Though, Madam Deputy Speaker, you were not here for the member's remarks. She talked of strike action by women. I would just like to caution, please, the three deputy speakers not to go on strike, because I really dread to think what would happen to this place, with the greatest respect to Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to put on record my thanks to Megan Redhead, who is my senior caseworker and who, week in, week out, strives to deliver great results and improve the lives of the people of Carlisle, and who in the last couple of weeks has achieved the most remarkable outcome for one woman in Carlisle in particular. It's my privilege today in this International Women's Day debate to speak about another remarkable woman, an overlooked figure from the Victorian era, Angela Burdett Coutts, a woman whose compassion, generosity and determination helped shape modern philanthropy, a woman who embodied give to gain. She was born on the 21st of April 1814 in Piccadilly, the youngest daughter of Sir Francis Burdett and Sophia Coutts. She inherited not only her family's name, but in 1837 she inherited her grandfather Thomas Coutts' immense banking fortune, making her one of the wealthiest women in England. Deeply influenced by leading social reformers, including Charles Dickens, with whom she collaborated for many years, Burdett Coutts dedicated her fortune to tackling poverty, education and social injustice, earning her the name Queen of the Poor. Her philanthropy was extraordinary in its breadth. She helped fund ragged schools, built model housing in the East End, developed Columbia Market to bring wholesome but affordable food to the poor. She co-founded innovative projects such as the Urania Cottage, a home for vulnerable and homeless women seeking a new start in life. In 1884, she co-founded the London Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, which later became the NSPCC. She championed the protection of animals, becoming president of the Ladies' Committee of the RSPCA, and commissioned the commemorative statue and fountain to Greyfriars Bobby. Her humanitarianism reached far beyond Britain, endowing bishoprics in Cape Town, Adelaide and British Columbia. Back home, she funded drinking fountains and animal troughs right across London. She financed Charles Babbage's early computing efforts, and she contributed significantly to hospitals and churches. I first came across her when I discovered she had funded the building of St Stephen's Church in Carlisle in 1864. Having learnt that the new St Stephen's Church in Westminster, just a stone's throw from this place, had been financed by Miss Burdett Coutts, the then Bishop of Carlisle wrote to her to inquire whether she would fund the building of a new church in one of Carlisle's poorest areas, Wapping. Not only did she agree and personally select the stained glass for the church, she also gifted a peal of 8 bells that were, on the church's demolition in the 1960s, installed in the new St Elizabeth's Church at Harrowby, and where they remain to this day. In 1871, Queen Victoria recognised her immense contributions by granting her a peerage, making Baroness Burdett Coutts one of the few women of her era to receive such an honour in her own right. Like all female pioneers, she was unafraid to challenge convention. Possessing considerable wealth, she was beset by suitors. Many men proposed marriage to Miss Coutts, and she declined all of them. She did, however, propose marriage to her friend and advisor, the Duke of Wellington, when he was 79 and she was 33. He gently declined her. But that was nothing to the scandal her eventual marriage caused. When she was 66, she married 29-year-old American William Lyman Ashmead Bartlett. In doing so, she not only caused an outrage in Victorian society, but she triggered a clause in the will of her grandfather's second wife, which stipulated that she must marry an Englishman. And in doing so, she lost much of her multi-million-pound fortune. Madam Deputy Speaker, since discovering Angela Burdett Coutts, I have mused not just on how her stories, like Angela's, deserve to be more widely known, but how we should celebrate the female philanthropists and change-makers that did so much for people and wider society. So, In closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to invite you, the Minister, and indeed all colleagues from across the House to support not simply a statue or a plaque to female changemakers, but to an audible celebration featuring the Coots bells from St Stephen's Church in Carlisle in a new national monument to the social change that women like Angela Burdett Coots and so many that we've heard about today have made possible.
Josh Newbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to speak in today's phenomenal debate marking International Women's Day alongside so many remarkable women across this House, including the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton, who I thought gave an inspiring maiden speech. Although she's no longer in her place, I particularly want to thank her for her words of solidarity for our trans community, including trans women, who should never be forgotten in this discussion. I think it's appalling that the Honourable Lady has already experienced intimidation just for standing shoulder to shoulder with our trans siblings, but I hope she knows that many of us on all sides of the House will have her back on that. Now, as a man, I approach this debate with a little hesitance because I am acutely aware that the experiences being discussed today are not my own. But I also remember how many women across this House contributed so thoughtfully to the debate on International Men's Day, and it reminded me that progress on equality has never come from working at cross purposes to one another, but from working together. The women who shaped my life, particularly my mum and my sister, raised me not only to respect women, but to champion them, to raise women up, to challenge barriers whenever we see them, and to take that responsibility seriously in the work that we do in this place. Since becoming a father to my daughter, these issues have taken on an even deeper meaning for me. When you look at the world through the eyes of your child, you start to notice things that you might have taken for granted. My daughter's only 6 years old, and yet I've already heard her say things like, "I can't do that, it's a boy's job," and describe certain roles as ones that require you to be brave, an attribute that she associates with men. Now, I can assure the House that my husband and I made sure that she knows exactly what she can do, which is any job she wants to, and that she is exceptionally brave herself. But hearing that from a 6-year-old reminded me that despite the progress we celebrate on International Women's Day, the messages that children absorb about what women and girls can or can't do can still shape their ambitions from a very young age. And as a parent and as a member of this House, that is something that I feel a responsibility to challenge. Every girl in this country and beyond should grow up believing that her ambition is limited only by her talents and her determination. One issue that I want to touch on, and it has been touched on by other honourable members, is the perception of masculinity and how that shapes the experiences of both men and women. For a long time I've spoken about the challenges facing young men and boys, but doing that should never be seen as being in opposition to championing women and girls. In fact, the two go hand in hand. If we want a healthier society, we have to address both sides of the equation. Absolutely.
Member for giving way. He's made me remember something very important. When Sarah Everard was murdered, a number of us were lighting candles. I remember having a conversation with my son and daughter, where my daughter, who was 15, told her brother about all the times that she'd been catcalled and harassed on the street as a 15-year-old. So I absolutely agree with him that it is really important that this isn't just about educating girls or educating boys, it's about educating the human beings that we are raising. Does he agree?
Completely agree with the Honourable Lady. I think that allyship across many different characteristics is essential, but to me, I've always felt that anything that men can do to echo, raise up, as I said, the voices of women is incredibly powerful. It's something that we should very much take seriously and not shy away from in debates like this, where we perhaps feel that our voice isn't as important. It absolutely can be. Because too many men and boys today feel disillusioned with politics, with opportunity, and what positive masculinity can look like in modern Britain. That's a real issue and it deserves serious attention. But the answer to that challenge is not to exploit those frustrations by turning men against women. The answer is not to seek votes by weakening women's rights. Yet that is exactly the direction that some would take us. For example, as we've heard, the Reform candidate for the Gorton and Denton by-election suggested that people without children should be taxed for it, placing pressure on women to have children. That misogynistic view of women's role in society should be rejected in the strongest terms. I am proud of everything this Labour government is championing for women, including on closing the gender pay gap. British women still earn 13% less than men, but the pay gap isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Large employers are required to publish gender pay gap data, but this alone won't close it. This isn't just fiscal, this is cultural. Thanks to the Employment Rights Act, employers will now have to publish clear action plans showing how they will close the gap and support women to progress. But before they even go into work, as my daughter has shown me, girls can already feel that there are things that aren't for them, certain ambitions that are out of reach. But when we look at the history of opportunity in this country, we're reminded how much can change when assumptions and prejudices are challenged. One of the most powerful examples of that is the work of Jenny Lee, who, as well as being a true Fifer, as noted by my honourable friend, the member for Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy, was also one of my predecessors and an adopted sister of Cannock. As Minister for the Arts in the 1960s, Jenny championed the creation of the Open University, built on the belief that talent should not be limited by background, age, or sex. The idea that someone could study for a university degree from their own home was dismissed by many as unrealistic, but Jenny believed that education should be open to anyone with the determination to learn. The result has been extraordinary. The Open University has educated millions of people across this country and beyond, many of whom might otherwise have never had the opportunity to access higher education. That legacy reminds us that expanding opportunity is not simply about access to education, it's also about expanding the horizons of what people believe is possible for themselves. But equality also depends on recognising the barriers that women still face in other areas of life. Women's health has been far too often overlooked, with conditions like endometriosis taking years to diagnose and many women leaving the workforce because of untreated menopause symptoms. I'm proud this government is taking steps to tackle medical misogyny, from strengthening rights at work to improving support for conditions largely affecting women and expanding opportunity through education and childcare. I will close by saying that according to a report published by the UN, women in 2022, it could take close to 3 centuries before we can achieve full gender equality. That statistic should give us pause, but it should also strengthen our determination, because progress does not happen by itself. It happens when we smash outdated assumptions and refuse to accept that inequality is inevitable. And if my daughter and millions of girls growing up across this country are to inherit a fairer society, that work is going to need all of us in this House to continue that effort.
I know that the previous occupant of the chair did remind members that we need to be starting front bench speeches around 4:30. So if I could ask the remaining members to keep their comments to around 5 minutes, that would be very helpful. Apsana Begum.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will do my very best to do so. I congratulate members for their contributions in the debate so far, and in particular, of course, the Honourable Member for Gorton and Denton for a very impassioned first speech about the rich traditions in her constituency of standing in unity and for humanity against attempts to divide. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's now also 6 years since I delivered my first speech in Parliament during a similar debate on International Women's Day, in which I paid tribute to our local history of women's struggles for social justice, which continue to be daily sources of inspiration. Today's debate comes as the cost of living crisis continues to foster a sense of injustice, uncertainty and anxiety across the UK, set against a brutal backdrop of more than a decade of Conservative austerity and chronic underinvestment in public services, services which were left hollowed out and in many instances privatised by the last government. The cost of living crisis has meant that women are more likely than men to lose their jobs or reduce their paid work, given that they are more frequently employed in sectors that have been directly disrupted by austerity measures and impacted by cuts and underinvestment in public services. Women, particularly Black, Asian and minority ethnic women, continue to account for around 2/3 of low earners and are more likely to be working on zero-hour contracts or part-time contracts as well. Ahead of the UN International Day to combat Islamophobia this weekend, I'm all too aware of how Muslim women are among the most economically disadvantaged faith group in the UK, impacted by the prevalence of negative stereotypes, harassment and hate crimes. Increased overlap of working and caring responsibilities has added to the ongoing reality that caring continues to be a major factor in women's ability to participate on equal terms. Put simply, women still face structural economic inequality through their lives, and this intersects with other structures of inequality, including race and disability. We also know that violence against women, including trans women, continues to blight our society. I know personally that the impact of domestic abuse on the physical and mental health of survivors can be devastating. 4 years ago, I faced a reselection process in which numerous complaints were made about rule-breaking and misogynistic intimidation, a process marred by the involvement of my ex-husband and his associates. As many members of this House will be aware, I subsequently signed off sick from work. While activists and organisations in the domestic abuse sector expressed alarm at my treatment and my independent domestic violence advocate made representations on my behalf, the matter remains unresolved. The post-separation harassment, the institutional gaslighting and silencing goes on and on. What I am reminded about my lived experience is that domestic abuse can impact people from all walks of life and in all forms of employment, including those of us in public life. To this day, I still have women reaching out from across the country in support, and I am continuing to work with members from across this House to call on all political parties to ensure that political representatives who are survivors of domestic abuse are not exposed to further harassment in their roles. I also continue to call and campaign for better protections in the workplace more widely, from paid leave for domestic abuse to mandatory policies on domestic abuse in every workplace to eliminate domestic abuse in our society, because domestic abuse requires a whole society approach. And I'm intrigued by today's announcements about a new unit to look into intimidation experienced during elections, given that my ex-husband stood against me at the last general election with the stated aim of trying to set the record straight, after everything that I had already endured. And I will look at ways in which I can contribute constructively in the government's work in this regard. Because this isn't just about me. No survivor of domestic abuse should be prevented from standing for office or staying in public life, having fled abuse because they experience post-separation harassment. And because there is a need to ensure that this place sends the right message in our country. In light of the Manderson scandal, we need an independent statutory inquiry into all of Jeffrey Epstein's links to British institutions and figures, which I, along with over 70 members of this House, continue to call for. It's also why I believe we need an independent investigation into the activities of Labour Together. Madam Deputy Speaker, as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Domestic Abuse and Violence, I am delighted to be working with Women's Aid to ensure that no survivor is left behind. As we approach the 5th anniversary of the landmark Domestic Abuse Act 2021 next month, this could not be more important. Because we know in the Vogue sector that the weaponisation of violence against women and girls by far-right groups and political parties such as Reform harms survivors and ultimately impedes the real work of tackling the root causes of society-wide violence to the detriment of women and girls. It's resulted in women fleeing persecution abroad, facing even more danger here, including the targeting of them at hotels over the past year. The government has an ambitious commitment to halve violence against women and girls in a decade, and our APPG welcomes measures in the Vogue strategy to try and achieve it, including the overarching cross-departmental approach and focus on prevention. The Minister for Safeguarding has positively engaged with us in this regard and is also delivering on other commitments. However, I am concerned about the government's wider programme of austerity, real terms cuts to benefits, including the retention of the overall benefit cap, the freezing of the Local Housing Alliance, and the continued injustice of the WASPI women's lack of compensation and ongoing assaults on civil liberties, targeting those who are most at risk, minoritised and migrant women, including those from GRT communities. I hope going forward that the government can address these areas in which migrant and minoritised women need our support. Thank you.
Gavin Bonavere.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, all of us in this House, women and men, will have been inspired by individual women, both in and out of our own lives. And I've certainly been inspired by many of the contributions made by our women members today, and I've been proud to be part of a minority that are listening and also contributing. And I'm proud to say that I've become who I am today because of many women in my own life, and just three I just want to single out and pay tribute to. My own mum, who brought me up despite many personal challenges in our family. Sister Bernadette in St John Joseph's Convent School in Malta, who gave me the self-discipline I hope I still have today. And Patricia Hennessy, who was an inspiring primary school teacher who helped me and so many others believe in ourselves. And that is why I'm sure I am here today. But I'm also proud to represent a constituency that's produced so many great women that have not just inspired those around them, but have made the weather, that have brought greater equality for women across the country. Every year I visit the grave of Lady Constance Lytton in Nebworth Park. She was a suffragette, came from a privileged background, but took another name so that her privilege would not give her advantages. She was imprisoned, she was force-fed, she carved V with a hairpin on her chest. V for votes for women. And women got those votes, but she soon lost her life, and every year we pay tribute to her and all the women who gave up so much to get where we are today, and we have so much more to go. But beyond that, we have other women in Stevenage who are still with us today. Barbara Follett, one of my predecessors, very proud of our Barbara, who helped found Labour Women's Network, and I stand next to the Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead, who's been a stalwart there herself, because Barbara helped lead the way, and much of the composition of this house is down to her hard work. And she's not just that, she's improved the appearance of many of us in this house, and I myself have been folleted by Barbara, so I give her my special thanks for that. And Baroness Sharon Taylor in the other place, leader of Stevenage Council for 16 years, and now doing great things as a minister for this government, improving housing for so many people, and housing is what gives women much better equality in their own lives. So these are trailblazers. But in my town as well, we also have other women. We have our deputy leader, Jeanette Thomas, who again is leading the housing revolution in Stevenage. We have our current mayor of Asian background, Councillor Nazmin Chowdhury, who with grace and understanding exemplifies the best of women in Stevenage. And finally, I want to mention our youth mayor, Charlotte Gregory, who has been shadowing me this week in this place, and she has also helped put these notes together for this speech, not all of which I can use, unfortunately. And I want to thank Charlotte for being an exemplar of the future of women in our town and our country. That may there be many more like her to come. I won't talk about what this government is doing. It's doing great things. I'll let the Minister set some of that out. But I fully support our mission to halve violence against women and girls in the coming years. It's a lot of hard work. We've got to keep pushing it, and I will support that all the way. I just want to end on one quick thing, and that is, this is not a zero-sum game when we're trying to get equality for women. It's good for all of us. It's good for men too. We all benefit from equality for women. So I will stop on that note so that so we can get to the end of this debate. But so I'm proud to take part in this debate, and I will fight for equality with every breath that I've got inside and outside this place.
Point of order, Dr. Lauren Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to make clear on the record that in my register of interest, I am a visiting research scientist at Francis Crick, which is an unpaid position, but just to make it clear, I forgot to mention it in my speech. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for her point of order. Her interests are now on the record. A very quick speech from Calvin Bailey.
Very quick speech. And Calvin Bailey said no one ever. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, and that shows the influence that someone such as yourself would have over someone like me. In 2021, the Defence Select Committee published a landmark report on women in the armed forces, and one of the most consistent things that comes out about women that serve is their feeling that they are failed to be recognised in the public. Our veterans do not feel that society acknowledges them, and so the committee recommended that we, on days like today, we use things like International Women's Day to make sure that those voices and experiences are heard. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege to serve alongside some exceptional women. When I led humanitarian aid operations in the Philippines, I did so alongside Master Sergeant Aircrew Samantha Green. When I delivered aid to the Yazidi women stranded on Mount Sinjar, it was Flight Lieutenant Abby Anderson that generated our beloved C-130J aircraft, and it was my very close friend Jen Bracewell managing both me, as you have done so, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the missions. And when I commanded a frontline squadron, I did did so learning from the venerable Wing Commander Kaz Viles, who's commander of the Royal Squadron, and I did so under the exceptional leadership of Air Marshal Soraya Marshall, who is without doubt one of the most outstanding military leaders of her generation. Despite the landmark case in landmark 1975 Sex Discrimination Act, women continued to be excluded from frontline combat roles in the British Armed Forces until 2016. It was only when I entered the MOD in 2018 that all those restrictions were finally removed. We would have all seen over the last couple of days how, regardless of why they were there, a female F-15 pilot was shot down over Q8, and we should all reflect that whilst women are putting themselves in the line of fire, there are people that are discharging them that are questioning whether their gender makes them suitable to do that job. And that reflects the other 5 minutes of discussion that I would have gone on to discuss how these things are being challenged right at this very moment, and that I call us all to make sure that those things that we challenge them when we get given the opportunity to speak. It's important that although the services are recovering and the number of women in the service are improving, that we point to the disparities in treatment that persist. Because while there are good stories, there remains challenge and inequities. And I urge anyone that sees my very truncated speech to go and listen to the other wonderful speeches that we've heard today, including the maiden speech, which will all be very ably summarised in a moment. But the last thing I want to say is that I started by saying that this landmark piece of work was done by the Defence Select Committee. It's important, therefore, that I recognise Lucy, Eleanor, Inez, Tony and Corinna, who sit in the background, who tolerate the likes of myself and help us produce this incredible work. So thank you for them. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I look forward to hearing the summation.
Sir Joy Morrissey.
With leave of the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, it has been an excellent debate with some outstanding contributions. And congratulations to the member of Gorton and Denton on her maiden speech, which was significantly better than mine, Madam Deputy Speaker. Her empathy, honesty, and generosity of spirit will serve her well in this place. And her genuine pride in Manchester could put even Andy Burnham to shame. And I want to thank the member for North East Hampshire for her excellent speech on FGM and raising this important issue. Also, we have South Derbyshire, who raised, Madam Deputy Speaker, the excellent idea of praising her staff. And I shall shamelessly copy that by also praising my office manager, Alexandra Turner, and my senior caseworker, Mary Shaw. Without these women, I would truly be lost. So thank you for bringing that. And thank you to all the women who serve as parliamentary staffers across the House. We would honestly be lost without them. I will go quickly. I shall keep my comments to a very small minimum, as I know that the Minister would like to speak. So I just want to say thank you so much for these incredible debates and the incredible time and honesty that all members put in today. And I want to also thank the Brent East MP, who her campaign for London Mayor will, I'm sure, be a smashing success. I was the first female to make it to the final three for the London mayoralty for the Conservatives, and I would absolutely be terrified to stand against you. So I have no doubt that you will take up the space of London and do a fantastic job. And Aberdeen North, thank you for your contribution for standing up for young women and girls in online harms. This is something that this member has continued to champion, not just in this debate, but throughout her time in Parliament. And I want to talk about everyone, and the member for Gower, and child sexual exploitation, and really championing that issue was so important. I feel as if I'm doing all of you an injustice by cutting down my comments, of which I have a plethora of, short, but please know it was an incredible debate to watch all of you, and we do have more in common than we think. And with that, as we bring the debate to a close, you'll be happy to hear, it seems fitting to return to Nancy Asta. And so I want to close with one of her greatest quotes. She once said, "Women are young at politics, but they are old at suffering. Soon they will learn that through politics, they can prevent some kinds of suffering." We in this House have that chance for our women and girls. Let us take it. Thank you.
Minister Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm going to start my comments by first saying that thank you to the Minister for Equalities for securing this debate in government time. I think in the time that I've been in the House, this is only the second time that has ever happened. I'm incredibly proud to stand alongside her. I also want to say thank you to the opposition spokeswoman for the tone that was set throughout this debate, and to everybody else who has followed that tone. I have to say that I have felt tearful at lots of points. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's almost certainly something that the member for Hampstead and Highgate's mother would not be pleased for me to say. It is either both hope or anger, or just that I have my period, that makes me feel both tired and hopeful and angry in equal measure to the member from Aberdeen. If I get through this without crying, it will be a miracle. So I just really want to say a massive thank you. Also, as others have done, I had assumed, actually, because sometimes I don't pay much attention, that this debate had actually been called by the member for Brent East, who does that service so well every year through the Backbench Business Committee, but it in fact was the government's doing. And I thank her for her comments and agree that she would be, and I hope that she is a challenge to whoever she stands opposite. And, of course, to the member for Gorton and Denton, who made her maiden speech. When I made my maiden speech, I commented on what a sexist thing it was for it to be called a maiden speech, and that I wasn't a maiden because my children were in the gallery. So, true to form, talking about my period and my lack of virginity, I shall continue. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to her. I shall put aside my Birmingham versus Manchester rivalry and say that she is very welcome here, and across this house. As I'm definitely not going to repeat what I said to her when I first introduced myself to her, but it was a long. You can paraphrase it without it being sweary. That there are lots of lovely people here, regardless of which political parties people come from, and that when we work together, we are always strongest. I wish that I could go through everybody's statements, but I do just want to highlight the member for Penistone and Stocksbridge, a woman who I work very, very closely with, and gave me campaigns that we had worked on together, gave me cause to cry earlier in the week. The only thing that I would say is that she ruined Bridgerton for me, because I've only seen the first episode, and so for that I am irritated. However, she always speaks with such passion, and that who doesn't deserve love? I mean, that is it. She rang out from the chamber. I would like to pay tribute to the towering figures of the past that everybody has mentioned, who have advanced the causes of women's rights, but we have also all paid tribute to the women who, without fanfare and acclaim, support families and contribute to their communities every single day. I personally could not cope without the women in my life propping me up and making me laugh and just noticing the stuff that needs noticing, and then people not noticing that how important that little act of love actually is. And so we have spoken of progress and of celebration, but we know that we have far to come. To the women of specifically, and there are many countries in the world I could highlight, but many members have highlighted the women of Afghanistan, and Iranian women have featured very heavily in this debate. I am the sister-in-law of a beautiful and now departed Iranian woman who died of breast cancer but made her home in our country because her country was not safe for her. The bravery of the women who stand up to be counted in Afghanistan and Iran currently should move every single one of us. When we don't want to come here on a Monday morning, imagine the privilege to be able to stand and speak out in this place. But now the reason I stand, the reason I stood to be elected to Parliament in the first place is that while we are gathered here in the heart of our democracy to discuss these issues in comfort and in safety, beyond these walls in every part of our country, women and girls are suffering. They are being attacked, abused, harassed and stalked. At home, in public places and online, the scale of violence against women and girls shames our society. And today's debate is not a moment for detailed policy talk, so I won't do that, but I will say that I am proud to be part of a government that is tackling this as if it is the national emergency that it is. And has been underscored by many people who have spoken about our commitment to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. But we know that words are not enough. Plenty has been promised and pledged in the past without results. And that is why our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy published in December had to be different. It has to deploy the full power of the state to deliver the change that is desperately needed. And I wanted to take this up, and actually it is just a piece of paper, it is just a document, and I have always said that when it needs to be stretched and ambition needs to be stretched, then that is absolutely what it should be. And so I, with some pleasure for the brilliant women and campaigners, and credit to the Domestic Abuse Commissioner who have campaigned for what I am about to say, which was not in the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. And before I take on the grim task of reading out the names of all the women who have been killed in the last year, I want to take this opportunity to commit the Home Office to funding and delivering the oversight mechanism for recommendations made in domestic homicide reviews. We will put in place a system that strengthens accountability and ensures learning is consistently embedded across both local and national agencies. This is about turning lessons into action, not just letting those documents sit on a shelf in some local authority. And by doing so, we will drive meaningful change that is so desperately needed, because those women's names aren't even, like, they used to just be numbers, now they are names. They have to make a change to enable us to prevent any future horrific deaths. It has been a long and arduous struggle, but I do believe that with drive and leadership, change will come. Tragically, though, it will be too late for the victims whose lives have been ended by this scourge, I can never say that, scourge, and their shattered families. And that brings me on to the task at hand. I will now read the names collated arduously every year for over a decade by the Femicide Census of the women who have allegedly been killed by men in the past year. They are Angela Chetty, Joanne Penny, Michelle Egg-Bailey, Meletta Rosevere, Carmenza Valencia Trujillo, Rachel Dixon, Claire Anderson, Parmajit Kaur, Claire Burns, Sarah Reynolds, Hein T. Vu, Rebecca Campbell, Pariah Vasey, Tracy Davies, Pamela Munro, Amy Pike, Elizabeth Tamalor Adunzi, Nanena Chima, Catherine Perkins, Margaret McGowan, Ellen Cook, Rachel Vaughan, Marjama Osman, Yajaria Castro Mendez, Miriam MacDonald, Mary Green, Mandy Riley, Samantha Murphy, Isabella Knight, Christina Alexander, Annabelle Rook, Rianne Coulson, Nilani Nimalaraja, Irene Mabuga, Neela Patel, Sarah Montgomery, Angela Botham, Fortune Gomo, Phyllis Daly, Gwyneth Carter, Stephanie Blundell, Brenda Breed, Vanessa White and her children James and Sarah, Courtney Angus, Nikiru Chima, Kimberly Thompson, Shara Miller, Paris Kendall, Sophia Caton, Zawa Salah Mukhtar, Nuwahulaj Dona, Naroda Kalapni Nuwahuila, Cheryl Wilkins, Helena Hoysan, Tia Langdon, Nadata Bob, Lina Sang, June Bunyan, Michelle Thompson, Anne Green, Shelley Davis, Anjani Sindir, Catalina Burley, Cherise Bailey, Sonia Axelby, Agnes Druskines, Michelle Kennedy, Angela Sheelis, Stephanie Irons, Dicasey Nurse, Natalie Egan, Colleen Westerman, Katie Fox, Lainey Williams, Lily Storinova, Z Quing Kay, Julie Wilson, Maria Sakenu, Lisa Smith, Janet Bowen, Samantha Lee, Lisa Marie Hopkins, Gilly Livey, Tanya Williams, Gloria de Lazare, Victoria Hart, Lisa Denton, Vanessa Poulton Chanda, Helen Rundle, Anam Rafay, Rita Rowley, Amal Raitan, Carla Maria Georgescu, Helen Bird, Angela Clayton, Naomi MacGyver, Caroline Barraclough, Jennifer Simmons, Ellie Flanagan, two women in their 40s whose names have not yet been confirmed. And the final name on this year's list was a name, and this always happens every single year, is there is always a name that has to be written on because it comes in as I'm walking in, to give you an idea of the regularity of this happening, and that is Carly Soane. The following women whose names have not been read out in previous years are Lat Parks, Delia McInerney, Lucy Harrison, Leila Zarju Negana, Judith Law, Jane Riddle, Dawn Kerr, Victoria Adams, Simone Smith and Brigitte Rizzulli. I am grateful to the women of the femicide census for making sure that the previously incomplete lists, because the information was not known, that those women can be remembered. I also want to take a moment to remember those who have died by suicide or in unexplained circumstances as a result of their abuses. We commit to do more so that their names are also not forgotten and they outstrip the women on this list by some margin. We refuse to forget these women who all deserved so much more. I want to once again thank the Femicide Census for the tireless work that goes into collating these names every year. We find it difficult to listen to them, and they look through every single story. I express my profound gratitude for their work and the work that they do to raise awareness of women and girls who have been so tragically killed by men. There is so much more that I could say in conclusion, but the list continues to speak for itself. I will finish by saying only this. May these women get the justice that they deserved, and may we honour them by preventing others from suffering the same fate. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered International Women's Day. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.